Hey, what's going on, everybody? Hi, welcome to the program. It's the Jeff Gerstmann Show for, August 18th, 2026. I'm your host for this week's edition of the program. My name is Jeff Gerstmann. Hi. We're continuing on the road of video games. We are now about, we are a week away from the Gamescom live stream, Gamescom opening night live. That'll be taking place sometime on Tuesday. It's one of those things where it's like it's 8 o'clock in Germany, and what does that mean here? Is it after? Was it so? That's at noon here, 8 somewhere around 8 hours. I forget what it is. Time, man. This is why we should have all switched to Swatch Internet time. We had it. Sega was right when they rolled it out for Phantasy Star Online. They knew what the hell was going on. You know, we could have had it all, and instead, now something's happening in Germany, and I don't know when it's going on. Right now, it's 751 beats here. I was gonna say here in Southern California, but it's all around the world. That's how many beats it is. So it's this is the magic. This is how it's supposed to work. But we lost it all. I don't know. I need to find, if I could find my Apple Watch tells Swatch time just fine, but I had my actual Swatch watch then that I picked up, so I could get my PSO games together, get my crew together, even though I think 3 of us were in the same time zone anyway, and then one guy was in Texas sometimes. What time is it in Texas? I don't know. Do they still have time in Texas, or do they regulate that out of existence? I don't know. It's like, no more weed. Also, time is banned. This is Texas. They said they were going to mess with us, and we've got to prove it. Anyway, I don't know what's going to go on with Gamescom. It is kind of the last big preview and announcement focused thing before the Game Awards, right? And so in a way, in a world where there's no E3, like, a lot of stuff is kind of split apart when it comes to those sorts of announcements. And I've never been to Gamescom because there was rarely a reason to go. We would send everyone to E3 because, it was close. It was a drive, literally. And it made sense to send everybody down there. Gamescom would happen a couple months later here. You'd have your E3 in June, and then August would be Gamescom. And it was just like leftovers, It was like Gamescom was not as big of a deal. It was not as big of a show. For games that had like multiple hits, like a fighting game with multiple characters, it'd be like, okay, well, here's another announcement for that game, and here's another character for this. Or hey, we've got a lightly updated trailer or whatever, but it was a lot of the same like preview builds, like demo builds, hands-on opportunities that you already had at E3. And so you would go for like a handful of games. It was bigger for PC back in the day because there was a lot of European PC stuff, your farming simulators and all of that sort of stuff. and so we would send a handful of people, but really, the stuff that was happening over there back in the GameSpot days, there was a GameSpot UK for a good chunk of time. And so they would kind of take the lead on a lot of that stuff, and we would send some people out as well. But it was just never something that mattered all that much. Obviously, in a world where now E3 is completely gone, those opportunities are really up for grabs. And you combine that with, like, there's developers, you talk to developers, especially around, it's mostly centered around GDC, but the sentiment is still true. Like, there are a lot of developers and a lot of people around the world that don't want to come to the US right now. It's very expensive. The situation here is very weird with, are you going to get pulled off the streets, and, are they going to demand to dig through your phone at the border? Like, just a bunch of worrying shit that, a lot of developers don't want to come in for GDC. And then that kind of holds true for some of the other events. There were developers there were developers that were that I heard from that were pretty on the fence about coming in for even Summer Game Fest, or we're just like, maybe we'll just do another event somewhere else, or we'll do this, or, like there was some concern about like, should we send our people there or not? It doesn't seem like a lot of people really want to go, and in the end they ended up making the trip, and it's like it's mostly fine, but you kind of never know, and that's sort of the it's a disappointing situation for tourism as well, but like just the ability to get things done business wise is a hassle. So I know a lot of developers are bummed out that GDC continues to be in San Francisco. Because A, it's in the US, and B, San Francisco is a really expensive city if you're a smaller developer that isn't backed by a massive company, which, in case you haven't noticed, there are not that many massive companies left anymore to back developers coming into the States. It's a harder trip to justify, and so I think some folks are hoping that they move the show somewhere else or whatever, but GDC doesn't seem interested in that so far anyway. And maybe things will change and they won't have to, but that's kind of the lay of the land right now. And so all of these things I think help Gamescom become a much more relevant show, because Summer Game Fest is growing every year. It's a big deal. There are plenty of big games shown there, announced there, whatever. But it's not E3 sized, and so if you've also got video games and maybe you're not ready for the time frame of Summer Game Fest, or you're just not going to compete on that stage, or or whatever. You can show your game at Gamescom, and there's a lot of a lot of press come from around the world to Germany to see that sort of stuff. And then there's also Opening Night Live, which is another Keighley fronted show, where they are showing trailers and announcing games. And so the vacuum that E3 created, obviously it led to a situation where Keighley could create the Summer Game Fest, and also created this opportunity for the longtime organizers of Gamescom to kind of seize upon that and make it be a bigger show. Like, a lot of people go because it was a public show. E3, it always had numbers that dwarfed E3, but it was also open to the public, and so the numbers weren't really the same. It was more comparable to compare Gamescom to something like Tokyo Game Show, because TGS would have public days as well, and I don't know. The stories I always heard from people who went to Gamescom were that if you were there on the public days, that it was a good reminder that just like there's like, I don't know what's going on, and I don't want to generalize, but it just seemed like, I don't know, man, people in Europe, they just don't really use deodorant, and then they get in these sweltering halls, and it's just like this massive stink. It's like a Smash Brothers tournament in there, And so that was always the report coming back, was like, dude, it fucking stinks there. It's a fucking nightmare. Like, the show floor just stinks of bodies. Like, that was every year. That was the report out of Gamescom. What happened to Gamescom? It fucking stank is what happened, man. And so I never went. but I don't know. I want to go now because there's no E3, because there's a lot of people smoking indoors too. So yeah, it was like a ridiculous combination in some parts of the building, I guess. But Gamescom has become much more appealing because I think there's just a lot more games, and so for the past month or so, I've been getting people saying like, hey, if you're coming to Gamescom, we're doing this, and there's some overlap now with some of the smaller games where some of those games are also at PAX, and so you would have this kind of double whammy of like, well, there's Gamescom, and then also PAX is happening in Seattle, not that far off, and so some Gamescom builds would make their way to PAX or like whatever. KLU64 says, wait, Americans think we don't use deodorant? What the fuck? I don't know what the situation is. Maybe it's deodorant that doesn't work, or what. I don't know what the deal is, but like the report back from Gamescom was consistently, there's a fucking stink here that I've never experienced in any other part of the world or like anything like it. So I don't know. Like I said, I've never been there, but American conventions don't suck. Yeah, maybe it is just the mass of people, right? I don't know, like PAX was never, I never really got too much of a stench out of PAX. But maybe it just wasn't as attended as some of these other things. E3 was never a problem, for sure. But yeah, I don't know. It's Pat says New York Comic Con was tough. Yeah. I don't know what it is. Yeah, just a combination of like no air conditioning indoors and and whatever else. But that was always the report out of Gamescom was that it was bad. So yeah, we'll get to opening night live here in a week, and we'll see another kind of batch of games. I think that the problem, I don't know, man. Like we were talking last week about this idea of games debuting on Netflix with the GTA trailer and all of that sort of stuff, and like how do you announce a game? And E3 was a massive stage that like pulled in eyeballs from mainstream media, and so like so the industry would tell itself, even if it wasn't always 100% true, it was always like, this is the place to do your announcements. This is, the world is watching. If you want to get the word out, the time is now. And that made a lot of sense in kind of a pre-YouTube era and whatever else, right? Because literally you had TV stations going there, especially the LA stations mostly, but some of that stuff would get syndicated out, where they'd go and they would give their mainstream media speech like, here's Lara Croft is here, the video games have come a long way since the days of Pac-Man, like all that garbage. And I've talked about it before. USA Today would have the exclusive on whatever Nintendo's announcement was, and like there was just there were norms in place, and it felt big. And it felt big for the video game industry. And then much like I think plenty of other industries, I don't think it's necessarily something that's exclusive to video games, but like the internet taking hold the way it has. Finally got companies to ask those questions about like, hey, why do we spend so much money to come to LA and set up this big booth for like retail buyers and the press and like all this stuff? Like it's, it's not a public event. Like it just, the relevancy of the show came into question. And for whatever reason, that hasn't happened to Gamescom. Like I think it's because it's a public show and they can say like, well, there's like 100,000 people here. And maybe because it's in Europe, I think there's an aspect of it where like, yeah, I mean, we have a division of people there working anyway, like they should do this. Otherwise, what are they doing? And I wonder if that's a part of it. At least for some of the companies based out of either, America or Japan or something like that. If they're just like, yeah, I don't know, man, the European team needs something to do. So, when they're not just translating all of these games into 5 languages, and shipping them whenever they can get them done. I guess that's not the case. Games ship worldwide now, but it used to, I mean, that was the other kind of weird thing about going to Cologne or Leipzig or, like, I guess before Gamescom, it was just the Leipzig Games, whatever it was, is like games over there would ship so much later that sometimes you would send people over there and they would be playing games that had been out in the US for like 4 months and had been out in Japan for like 8, weird situations like that where it's just like localization just took a lot more time, and game shipments didn't need to be worldwide because we weren't talking to each other, and so spoilers or whatever, it just wasn't really a problem. You needed time to make these games run at 50 hertz or whatever, and now it's not at all like that. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like even the Gamescom opening night live shows over the past couple of years have honed themselves in a more worldwide direction, if that makes any sense. I want to say that some of Keeley's first shows out of Gamescom were really heavy on the here's a big long chunk on Truck Simulator and farming this, and that there was just a lot of some like. There was a big chunk of games in there that you're like, oh, these are some European-ass video games right here. All right. And I feel like the show has maybe lost a little bit of its local flavor, but it's traded that in favor of, I think, having a little bit more prominence on the world stage. And so that's probably for the best. But it is, I don't know, I sort of miss I sort of miss hearing from someone who's there covering the show, and they're just like, yeah, I don't know, I took a Focus Home Interactive appointment or whatever it is, you know, and I just saw like 20 games that are never going to come out in English, or just like, you know, they're going to be PC games that no one's ever going to think of in the States, and whatever, because it's 9 different tractor games and whatever the fuck else, and you know, that game based on that German cop show, Crash Team, Cause for Alarm, whatever, I forget what it's called, but Crash Time, I think, is what the localized Xbox 360 one of those was. But yes, if it was your home for soccer management for sure. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about some video games and more. You know, why not? There was something I forgot to do, and now it's biting me in the ass. Here it is. Family finances can be tricky to stay on top of. You know, you've got multiple credit cards across the family. You've got, you know, your different bank account situations. You know, in my case, I got like, you know, business bank account, personal bank. It's, you know, sometimes that stuff can just be a mess. And so every month you're sitting there like, okay, I need to log in over here and look at this. I need to log in over here and look at this. It's one of the reasons why Rocket Money has been so fantastic, is because you can just connect all of your stuff up, get it all together, and then get a nice easy dashboard that says, hey, how's it going? You know, how much money came in this month? How much money went out this month? Is one higher than the other? Can you tell me about it? Where did the money? Hey, Rocket Money, where did the money go? You know, important questions like that. And you can figure out really easily if there's just a category that you've been spending a lot more on lately. In my case, it's the power bill, as it turns out. Keeping a house not swelteringly hot in the summer in Southern California is not cheap. Is not cheap. That was a surprise. So you can kind of keep a good, clear view of your finances, and then, you know, dig in deeper if you want. They'll send you notifications if there's a bill that seems like it's bigger than normal. And even better, Rocket Money has some premium features. They will go out and help you negotiate lower bills. They will keep track of your subscriptions and be like, hey, are you still using these? And both of those things have saved me some money, which has been outstanding. So, you know, take control. Get a look at your stuff. Download Rocket Money today. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/JeffG. That's rocketmoney.com/JeffG. Again, rocketmoney.com/JeffG. Mortal Shell 2 is out. I guess it's one of those things where if you bought the expensive version, you can play it now, but it's out a little bit later this week. And I have been playing just ever so slightly some of it. I'm not sure how much I'm going to stick with it, but it came in and I was like, you know, I remember playing a little bit of this pre-release and going like, there seems like there's something here, but it is, you know, from the outside looking in, I think it does look like kind of like a Souls game and has a lot of the trappings of that when it comes to, hey, you died and you dropped your stuff and you need to go back and get it. But if you die again, it's going to spoil and then you won't have it anymore. Or here's a couple of other things from another game you were familiar with. But it's not really a stamina-based game, so you can just kind of swing away on people. You have a meter. There is a resource meter, but it's used for kind of like your special attacks and also a gun. So you can just pull out a gun and shoot it, and then you need to build that meter back up by landing melee attacks, which I think is kind of an interesting sort of trade-off. It also creates a situation where the gun can be like crazy powerful in some situations because they know you can really only fire it a handful of times. Of course, you will encounter different weapons and items and stuff like that. I have not gotten super deep into it, so I haven't, you know, I don't have too much to report on that front. But it's a very nice looking game. And it's a lot, almost to its detriment, there is a looseness to its feel where its default set, this is maybe a telling thing, and obviously you can adjust this if you want, but the right stick is very loose. Like you can turn the camera around real quick on the default sensitivity settings, to the point where it's just like, oh, this feels broken. And it's like, oh wait, no, with like the type of game they're trying to make here, like it is a little bit different enough from kind of the more deliberate and some might say sluggish kind of Souls experience. But it is not some high-speed action game either. But you have some nice attacks at your disposal, and you're equipping these kind of passive and active items as you go through. And like I said, I've barely only kind of scratched the surface with it so far. But I just kind of wanted to at least highlight it a little bit, because what I have played of it so far seems pretty good. And I will end up playing some more of it. But I'm not positive. I'm never sure with games like that if it's going to be something that's going to like suck me in and get me all the way or not. Like, good first impression. I'll kind of keep going with it, and see how that stuff goes. I've also been playing a little bit of Rogue Eclipse. Rogue Eclipse is it's I guess a run based flying game. It's not Star Fox. There's another game that came out that is very much fucking Star Fox, like in an alarming, in an almost actionable way. Then I can't remember the name of that off the top of my head, but maybe I'll look it up in a sec here. Rogue Eclipse kind of puts you into these dogfights, and you're kind of blasting through these areas, and getting kind of some new abilities and moving forward, and you have really good speed control over the ship to the point where it almost feels like it drifts when you slow down. When you kind of want to get around on somebody, because that's what you do in dogfights, like that feeling of control in Rogue Eclipse is actually really good. And so the movement on that feels really nice. I found it to be a little bit monotonous, but that's something that, as you get better at it and you kind of get more stuff and kind of make your way through it, I think it starts to diverge in some interesting ways and give you some true options. But it's a very nice looking game. Also, I've been playing it on a PC, and yeah, you should give it a look. Yes, Wild Blue Skies is the bootleg Star Fox that also just came out. I did end up playing some of that, but not much. Like it's got furries, and the training mission is like almost word for word in some spots, where it's like the flow of that mission, you're like, oh, geez, guys, like this is okay. You're just kind of making. You're just okay. All right. You've and then you get to the end and you're like, now you're in an open area. Just fly around and as much as you want. And you're like, oh gosh, like you're really going for it. Which would be cool if they had not just released a Star Fox game. I think that's sort of the kind of the weird thing about it is like when you play the intro to that game and you're like, dude, I just played the real version of this. Like, why am I? You get into game, it's not exactly that. But control wise, in terms of just like, hey, you got bombs. Hey, you're gonna find weapon upgrades, and if you get hit a bunch, you might lose them. And like it's really a lot of mechanical similarities to Star Fox 64. And again, that training mission is. I'm not a lawyer, but man, it is almost actionable. I've been spending a lot of time. Maybe not a lot of time, but I spent probably more time with this than the other two combined. But I've been playing Marvel Tokon still. I finally had my comeuppance. I finally met my, well, I want to say met my match, but I finally unlocked ranked and started playing ranked games and was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, all right, yeah. There's like 9 different levels to this game and I'm at the bottom of them. So just got fucking crushed more often than not in a lot of these ranked fights. But man, yeah. I like playing ranked because it doesn't have the like there's no like you can only play against the same person a set number of times before it says okay, now you need to move on. And I like that about it because I don't want to necessarily just sit here and play against the same person over and over again, and I never know when to quit. I guess it's like whoever wins the set, right? But anyway, I find myself gravitating towards ranked in most fighting games just for like expedience, because that seems to be where the most players end up being, and it's just faster matchmaking and whatever else. But But dude, it is. I feel very exposed. I feel like, oh shit, I'm getting absolutely torn up. And that's been, I don't know, fun in its own way, because you realize like, oh dude, there's so much more. I was watching footage of, I don't know where this took place. Did CEO just happen? Did this happen there? Anyway, it was Justin Wong and Sonic Fox fighting, and I was watching that going like, ah shit. Yeah, man. This is it turns out I barely know how to play this game at all. Like, it's just like, oh shit, this is fucking a nightmare. Absolutely. Like, goddamn. But I'm still having I'm still having a decent time with it. And then the game I actually probably played most over the last week. What if they made a sequel to Bug, but it was only for kids? That's the question that they dared to ask when they made Gabby's Dollhouse Ready to Party, which came out last year. But as the kids have, my youngest is into Gabby's Dollhouse to a certain degree. The other ones have started to grow out of it, mainly because the youngest constantly wants to be watching it. It's a cartoon-esque. It is a part live action, part animated show that's been on for it's like a 7 years. It's been on for a while now. It's like some of the creators of Blue's Clues are affiliated with it. And anyway, they made a video game. It's the same bullshit publisher that makes all of the Paw Patrol games. It starts with an O. Give me a second here and I'll tell you. Outright Games. They did it again. And this thing, it like much like Bug for the Sega Saturn, it is like you're kind of walking on various tracks and you're kind of walking in four directions, but it is this polygonal thing. They kind of lock you down in ways where they have to draw arrows whenever you can decide where you want to move, because it's not always obvious. Like, it's not and then you get to these different locations and have to, like, you're assembling things for a party, and you have to get to these locations and do all this stuff. And I'm playing it more than they are because my daughter is 2, and she is, as much as she wants to hold a controller, she immediately hands it to me. She says, I want to play Gabby Cats. I'm like, okay, all right, let me turn on the Steam machine and get it all set up. Here you go. And then I turn here so that I can maybe type something. And then she's like shoving a controller into my hand. So I ended up playing quite a bit of fucking Gabby's Dollhouse Ready to Party. I don't think it's a very good game. I don't think it has a ton of variety to it. And a lot of the mini games almost play themselves. And superficially, it reminds me of Bug for the Sega Saturn. And so I think when we're done with this, I might fire up Bug and see if I can get the kids to play Bug. Which is, someone should take me to jail. You should not be forcing anyone to play Bug or Bug 2 at this point. They were bad games then, people. They were bad games then. But I'm curious to see, like, hey, does this remind you of it? Like, I almost want to hand them that and be, does this remind you of anything? And see if they go, like, oh, it's like the Gabby's Dollhouse game. But that's how it's been. I also unboxed and finally set up my Super Station 1. If you're unfamiliar with the Super Station, it's just a fancy mister that looks kind of like a PlayStation 1. I still have the box here. And it has a dock attached to it that has a drive on it. So, eventually, or I guess you can do it now kind of unofficially, you can put real discs into the drive and play them that way, which is kind of neat. I don't know. I don't really have any use for that, but it is a cool idea. And it has a bunch of ports on it, ports for PlayStation controllers, as well as a ton of different AV ports for hooking up to old TVs or whatever. Like, it has just composite on it, which is kind of fucking silly. And it has a slot on the bottom of the dock for an NVMe drive. So if you want to store your games there, you can. Because everyone's just got extra NVMEs laying around, and they're so cheap, why not buy one, right? Why not just get one? Yikes. And it's a mister at the end of the day. But the interesting thing about it, and this is something that isn't exclusive to this device, but it is kind of something that's sort of hand in hand with it, is this idea of what they call console mode. Like they've tried to create a visual and pleasing front end for the mister. Because normally you just are picking cores from a menu and saying, I want to play PlayStation. And then when you launch the PlayStation core, then you pick a game and it loads. They're trying to build something where, it, much like a front end for emulators, that, you could, look at a list of games with box art and all of that sort of stuff. They finally added support for keeping your games on your network instead of on the device itself to that console mode thing. So that finally got me to bust it open and set it all up and get it all working. I don't think that stuff is ready for prime time. Even with the network support in there, like there's just a lot of stuff about that front end that is unreliable, where like it won't pick up it won't see the server, and so you'll get a list of games and you'll hit the button and it'll be like, this drive is disconnected, you should plug it in, and be like, okay, well, I have sure that network share is definitely connected, I know that then, but there's just a lot of fiddly stuff. And so it's not quite this turnkey solution. I think some people were looking at this and thinking, oh, well, this is going to be like a mister that anyone can plug in and it'll be easy to set up and all that. And like, I don't know that it's necessarily, any easier on the setup front. They've papered over some of the rougher stuff in it. So, sensibly just setting up a mister in general, I think has gotten a little bit easier, but I still did have to bust out Balena Etcher and rewrite an SD card and do all of this other stuff. But, all of it seems to be advancing pretty quickly. Phoebe asks, not trying to ask about what makes it cheaper than a mister if it essentially does the same thing. So the difference between this and a lot of the misters of yesteryear, which are sold out in a lot of places, like Mr. Add-ons has not had misters in stock for a little while, I think. But the Mister platform was built around an existing device called the DE10 Nano. It's an FPGA board that was originally designed for like students. It's like it meant to be inexpensive because it was kind of subsidized for student use and what have you. So it was designed to be cheaper than normal FPGA boards, which can be fucking crazy. And so when those subsidies were in place, for usage by schools and whatever, it was an affordable device, and you people were making add-on boards for it that would add like USB support and analog video, like whatever. And so they sandwiched those together and they built a bunch of old video game things for it. That device is not really built for that purpose. It's kind of become the go-to purpose, I think, for a lot of that stuff, if I had to guess. But so what's happening is you have other people that are taking the innards or the what makes a DE10 Nano a DE10 Nano, and they're saying, okay, we can put that same FPGA chip onto a different board that is more custom built for the Mister, and we can cut some corners here and and so they're making their own boards for it. And those boards, those knockoff boards, I guess you could call them in some cases, are cheaper than the official one, but they do the exact same thing as the regular, enough for what you're using it for when you're trying to play old games. And so that's how they're able to make them less expensive, and that's how these kind of QM Tech misters and some of this other stuff have come along in recent years that are able to be had for a much lower amount of money. And that stuff's awesome. More people should be able to get their hands on this thing because it's rad as fuck. Though as more people get their hands on them, I think it's exposing as it's kind of as that's kind of happening and more people are maybe getting into it. You're starting to see see people complain about those rough edges a lot more. Like, oh, this thing's really hard to use. It's like, yeah, I guess, if you're not, already kind of steeped in networking and Linux and some of this other stuff. Yeah, there's just, there's going to be some funky shit in there that you're just not necessarily used to. And also I think that that's led to the rise of what we were talking about more recently, which is these kind of trashy arcade cores that just keep getting dumped out. Because like now you've got an audience of people that don't really understand the technical benefits of an FPGA, and they're just like, I just want to play the games. And so, you have this kind of almost existential crisis, I think, with some of these AI cores coming out. But also, I've seen in the commit logs for regular, kind of Mr. stuff, I've definitely seen some AI stuff working its way in there as well. So it's not like the maintainers of the project are completely opposed to AI in any way. So I don't know. It's not a good thing, because ultimately, like, if you're just recreating MAME and you're recreating the same problems as MAME and whatever else, I think that there's really no point to it. But again, as you kind of get to a somewhat more casual audience, I think you get a lot of people that are just like, they don't really see the difference, and they don't really care. And so they don't really understand. Like, it's a lot of people that should probably have just bought a Raspberry Pi, honestly. Because it's a lot of people that would probably have an easier time, because I think that some of those Raspberry Pi platforms, and some of the, whether it's fucking, I don't know, Batacera or RetroPie or whatever else is out there, that some of those setups are a little bit easier for people who are not super technically minded. Like, it would probably be easier for those folks to set up a Raspberry Pi than it would be for them to set up a Mister. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But the Superstation 1 is a cool device. It's like a very slick, again, as someone who was buying bare boards and just pushing them together and going like, I hope I don't bend all these pins, not that many years ago, to build a Mister, seeing something in a slick case like this that is, all fucking cool looking and has its own cool dock with all these ports, and like, it's a very nice device, man. It's really neat. It doesn't have dual SD RAM, so like I'm not going to use it over my actual regular Mister, but it's I might set it up in a different room. It's got built-in Wi-Fi and stuff, so I can just connect it to the network wherever I want to put it. And maybe if console mode gets a lot better, then maybe the kids would be able to use it. Sometimes my son wants to play the Magic School Bus game for the Genesis. I don't know. Let's take a break, and we'll come back. We'll get into the proper news after this. After years and years of wearing imperfect jeans, I'm here to tell you about the perfect jean. From the company, The Perfect Jean. That's right. They were so perfect, they named the entire company after the jeans. It's nice to have some comfortable jeans that fit right. They got a little bit of stretch in them, but they're not like big, crazy, stretchy, ridiculous pants. They're good-looking jeans that are comfortable. You can wear them all day long, standing, sitting, walking around. Are you getting ready for the Perseid meteor shower? It's happening like around now. Maybe you've got a date to go out and look at them when the sun goes down, and and maybe for that you maybe shouldn't just wear some nasty sweatpants or something like that. Get some jeans that are going to stay on and look good. And you're not going to be messing around with the waistband, like, oh, they're bunched up here, they're bunched up there, the crotch isn't right. It's just a good fitting pair of jeans. I've been wearing a pair of the perfect jeans when jeans situations arise, and they've been a wonderful and comfortable pair of jeans to get out into the world in. Because let's face it, sometimes you just can't wear cut-off sweatpants another day. I mean, you got to wash them, right? You need the perfect jean. And the perfect jeans fit, and they feel comfortable, and they're worth the money. They're built to last. You don't need to worry about tailoring, hemming. These are not jeans that you need to break in. These are not jeans that you're like, I need to put these in the freezer to make sure the germs get killed, because if I wash them once, they will fall apart before my very eyes. No, the perfect jeans are built to last. Wash them. It's fine. It's going to be fine to have a nice pair of frickin' jeans. So, hey, get over to The Perfect Jean and learn more about it. You can get 15% off your first order plus free shipping at theperfectjean.nyc or Google it. It's The Perfect Jean. Either way, use the code JeffG15 for 15% off. In the news this week, we've got a new interview with Hiroko Totoki, who is the CEO of Sony. This interview ran in the Wall Street Journal. Not really a ton of stuff to talk about because this is primarily like an article built around, historically Sony making TVs and Walkmans and whatever else, and now they're kind of in the content business more than anything. So video games get touched on in there. As videogameschronicle.com notes, you're home for the news. They do kind of briefly touch on the PlayStation 6, mostly just to note that they are still claiming they don't know when that's going to come out, that they have not made the decision. A couple of quotes out of here, kind of because of the various tariffs and component shortages and everything else that we've been dealing with for some time now. He kind of said, considering the importance of that stuff, we need to take some action. Otherwise, we can't survive in this landscape. And that they have not fixed they have not fixed a date for the PlayStation 6's launch. This is an English language interview. We got a version of this a few months ago through translation where they were just like, we are still deciding on the timing of the console and when that thing is going to come out. The quotes back then were like, we would like to really observe and follow the situation. And so back in May, they made it really sound like a wait and see kind of approach of just like, hey, are any situations around this going to change anytime soon? And I think they probably mean all of it, right? It's not just any one piece. It's like, are there going to be new kind of tariffs thrust upon everyone for no good reason that we'll suddenly have to deal with? Are there going to be component price increase? I mean, yes, there's going to be more component price increases, I'm sure. Whether that's RAM or whether that's, just kind of the continuing issues around GPU prices and availability to even just SSDs. I mean, when you go look at the cost of freaking high-speed hard drive business storage, whatever we're calling it this month, all of those prices have gotten incredibly fucked. I mean, fuck, man, even just buying a goddamn SD card has become an incredibly unpleasant experience, right? So across the board, they're getting hit. However many whammies you could come up with, right? It's not just a double whammy, it's at least a triple whammy. When it comes to trying to launch a console anywhere in this time frame, all the analyst chatter that has been going on for a while now, which even in light of, I think, them saying, hey, we don't know when we're gonna ship it. It's been a lot of talk for a while that 2027 looked like the year. And I have to imagine that is still the case, but I just wonder how many can they make. If the component shortages are what they are, there were some reports last week that Apple was even having a little bit of trouble sourcing components. That is it's that situation that we had during the pandemic where you would hear stories about Ford's got a factory full of trucks that need 2 parts installed in them before they're done, and they can't get those chips because the factories are closed from COVID. And so there's a huge chip shortage, and they can't fucking get their hands on the chips to finish these trucks. It sounds like that there are potentially iPhones in a similar situation that are just like, yeah, we've got the logic board all together, we've got all this stuff, we just need these things, and then we can assemble these fucking phones and then fucking sell them. Ah shit. Back in my day, god damn it, they didn't want to. There was a chip shortage that was impacting the NES. There were games that got delayed because they couldn't, they couldn't find the fucking chips to get them out the door. And that was, I mean, as a kid, that just seemed like, what the fuck is this? How does this even work? And now to be going through something 10 times as fucking crazy all these years later is very, I don't know. I hesitate to say cyclical because, it's just such a strange fucking scenario. But I really don't know what you do with that. What you do with a PlayStation 6 in any part of this environment, what do we? I imagine so. Like we're about a month out from Wolverine, right? Unless there's some dramatic delay of the PlayStation 6, I have to imagine that they eventually do. Like I feel like we're entering a window, right? If we assume that the console is out, next year or right around this time next year, right? I mean, we'll probably be looking at more like October or November, but like we're getting into the part of the year when you would launch a console. So I guess we're, a year or a little bit more out. I would assume that they do a PlayStation 6 upgrade or, whatever. I assume they do a version of Wolverine that is properly optimized for PS6. Ripe Live Jam says people hunger for GTA 6. Rockstar will not do a quick and easy dirty upgrade for GTA 6. Rockstar will wait a number of years. They will ship it on PC, and then they will do upgraded console versions on the back of that PC work, and they will charge you for the pleasure. Like that's, I mean, don't be foolish. And yeah, Colonel Sanders says we don't even know what they'll do with GTA Online. That thing might be a separate purchase too. That would be so, like, in terms of like bait and switch or rug pulling situations or scenarios. I think if they launched GTA 6, I mean, we're running out of time, right? I mean, if GTA 6 is just a single player thing, and they're like, oh, by the way, GTA Online is going to be a separate thing, and it's not going to come with this package or whatever. I think that you would have, again, this kind of this more modern audience for GTA. I think they would feel very hornswoggled is perhaps the word. If that ended up being the scenario, obviously, yes, they've been talking about the single player experience or whatever, and there's been a lot of stuff like that, right? So I don't, like it is kind of like the actual big question mark over GTA. People are just like, I want to see this trailer so I can see what the fucking trucks look like. Whatever, man. It's going to be fucking Florida. They're going to yuck it up and write some fucking jokes. And, they'll tell their story. They'll do their kind of modern day Bonnie and Clyde Florida story. And that sounds very exciting. And like, honestly, like that is the thing I come to GTA for. So like good. But there is something of the information, the lack of information around what's happening with online seems very, yeah, I mean, we'll see. Surely they wouldn't do that, because I guess like the question is like, what percentage of players that are pre-ordering GTA do you think, primarily play GTA Online? Are pre-ordering it because they play GTA Online and they want more of that or whatever. Like it feels like that's the main draw. It felt like that with GTA 5 for sure. That like once online really took off, like what percentage? Like there's a Call of Duty situation almost with the extreme popularity of that game over the last decade. What percentage of players do you think even played a significant portion of the single player in GTA, and how many people just like saw it online after it blew up and went like, oh dude, I'm gonna get that, and just immediately went and played that instead? Like it's gotta be a fucking pretty fucking, even with a game at the scale of GTA, that has to be a pretty big fucking number. And so the way I don't even want to say tiptoe around online stuff, the way they have just not addressed the situation, I think at some point that, like, we're on the cusp here of that becoming like concerning. And if there was a problem that they'll run into, down the line, it would be if they launched this as a single player thing, and like all of the GTA Online players were left holding the bag and being like, what the fuck is this? I don't want to play. Like, who are these fucking idiots? I don't want to, like, I want to run around Florida and do death matches or play whatever, whatever horseshit fucking role-playing garbage I'm into. I want to pretend to be a cop. That's my life. I'm a GTA cop. Like, there are people that just want to do that, right? And so the lack of information on that front, like, in some ways that has become more important than whatever the fuck the story in GTA ends up being, right? So, the closer we get to that, the more concerning that is. Like, if we get to this Netflix thing and there's zero mention of any kind of online thing coming out of that event, then a bunch of people pre-ordered something that they maybe don't understand what it is. I don't even know. I would not even know what to think. That seems unthinkable. You know what I mean? Like, if we get to that thing and it's not even that they don't even like confirm, like, hey, this is only going to be a single player game. They just like leave all of that shit hanging and they're just like, yeah, man, look at our cool story. If you buy the premium edition, you can put more wheels on your car, or whatever. You get 100 spoke rims. You want those? Keep it gangster. Is Luke going to be in that game? Is Uncle Luke going to be in GTA 6? These are the important questions, right? He's running for state Congress, I believe. So surely he should be on one of the radio. I mean, he's, he has done radio there for a good. Luther Campbell has done radio there for a long time. We needed a base 917 equivalent on the radio there, right? I mean, we got to have something. So we'll see, man. I really don't know. Zatoichi notes that on PlayStation, it looks like 16.4% of players completed the last heist in single player for I assume GTA 5. Which, yeah, I mean, those numbers are not surprising. Well, I guess, like, I wonder if that includes people, like, if they have unified trophies, if that's all PlayStation or if that's just the remaster or whatever, the PS5 re-release. I imagine, like, the later you bought GTA, the less likely you were to have played any of the single player, right? And so if the trophies aren't unified, then no one played it there. Because yeah, I finished GTA on an Xbox 360 because that's the version they gave us. We went to a hotel and they slid a copy across the table and we took it and hid it and got in a car. We walked there and took a car back because once you're holding on to something like that, you don't want anything fucking crazy to happen. And yeah, I played it on 360. And so, when those later PlayStation versions came out or whatever, like anytime GTA has come up since then and I wanted to play it, it's been like, oh, I need to install this. And then, like, I think you still need to get past like the introductory heist thing, right? The tutorial in the snow. I think you have to play that bit before it'll let you get online and fuck around. But I don't remember. Bulbous Pox says, counterpoint to all this, Red Dead 2 also sold insanely well, and it did not do that on the strength of online. I'm not saying that, like, there's no one who wants GTA 6 and this is a failure. I think you will have a bunch of angry people, is my point. It's not that, like, oh, if it doesn't have online, if they had said 6 months ago it doesn't have online, then I think that would have been something that could have impacted their sales. But at this point, now that we're off to the races with pre-orders and apparently it's pre-ordering quite well or whatever, I think that that's a potential situation. I don't know, and people can't easily cancel pre-orders anyway. So, I mean, you know, you pre-ordered before you had all the facts, I guess is probably the situation there, right? Like that would be the message to them, to people who, if that's the case. But surely that can't be the case, right? You don't take this many years, a decade plus or whatever, however fucking long it's been, and then launch this and not have online be a thing, right? Even if it doesn't launch day and date, I would assume that there's like a new online experience, and like a month later it'll launch or whatever. Like, but that's something that they would say prior to the game going on sale, right? And the longer they go without having talked about it, the crazier that situation seems. And I really don't know. I really don't know what to make of it. But again, I think if we come out of that Netflix thing with a similar hole in terms of information, that's when I think you start going like, oh, like they're doing something fucked up. Like they're actually doing something really fucking fucked here, by not getting out in front of it and telling people like, hey, online is going to be a separate thing, or online's not coming for 6 months or whatever. If it's like the first game where it's like, hey, it launches and it's single player only, and then, you know, the online launches in a month or whatever, like that's normal. That's fine. You know, there's no problem with that. But if there's some new hook to that, well, yeah, subscription based or like GTA Plus only or whatever the fuck, like, or that it's just something that gets rolled into the existing GTA Online and everyone gets free access to it. Because then you would have a bunch of people go like, oh, I pre-ordered GTA 6 and I didn't need to because this is all just in the thing. Or maybe you can only migrate if you buy GTA 6. And there's a billion different weird scenarios they could do, but they're all, you know, all of them sound confusing as I say them out loud. And this is something that should have, I don't know, feels like something that should have been addressed by now. But I guess, you know, well, is it? That's next week, right? Weird. Anyway, the PlayStation 6, who knows? They keep saying they're going to make one. Remedy has reported that Control Resonant has gone gold, and so it will make its September 24th release date unless you wanted it on a disc. The physical release date, this is a brief social media announcement that they made, so there's not a ton of detail here. It just says, hey, it's out September 24th, and the physical release date for the game is moved to October 15th. We need just a little more time to deliver the physical version to you, but rest assured, nothing stays contained forever. So if you want to buy it on disc, it'll be another month. Which is interesting, because what does gone gold mean then? Gone gold means you're ready to burn discs, and I would assume that if you've gone gold in mid-August for your game that's still a month, well, no, I guess a month is actually, maybe the turnaround on that is bad. Anyway, that the short version of it is that, yeah, the disc version of this is going to come out later. And because they're saying they have gone gold, that would mean that they've cleared cert and that the game is done. That's not to say that they aren't working on additional patches and stuff, but like the idea of going gold is not that you're not going to patch the game. It's that it cleared cert. It's that Sony looked at it and said, this doesn't cause the PlayStation to burst into flames. And you used the word options instead of start. So you didn't call it a start button. So great. That's all we're looking for. We plugged in different controllers to make sure that it didn't crash the game. We plugged in a DJ Hero turntable and the PlayStation didn't burst into flames, so your game can ship. You know? It has nothing to do with like, oh, the frame rate is bad. You know, like remember, certification is not a value judgment on a game. It is just literally, in some cases, I mean, not anymore. I can't imagine they do this anymore, but like there was a time I remember hearing from people that failed cert because they were like, yeah, I don't know, they plugged in a fucking Rock Band guitar and it made the menu go crazy, and we failed cert because of that, even though our game is not a guitar game or whatever. Like, you know, what if you had a guitar plugged in and you turned on the game, it would be bad, you know, so we had to go fix that, you know, like there's situations like that pop up. 2K has launched a new studio in Vancouver. This is according to Daily Hive, that is a, like, I guess covers a bunch of different local Canadian news. They have launched a studio called Small Axe Studios, and the two names affiliated with Small Axe are Aaron McCarty and Gary Patterson, who are VP, executive producer, and head of design, respectively. They are both, they both have extensive experience on FIFA. Patterson also, I think, has a good chunk of, like, he was a Criterion for some chunk of time, and so I think he has his credits on, like, the Burnout Paradise remaster and some other stuff like that. But they are some folks who have made them some FIFA games over the years. 2K went ahead and launched a page for Small Axe on their website, because they're hiring up. They're looking for lighting artists and design directors and all sorts of stuff. The Small Axe logo sure does look like that's a patch that would appear on a soccer jersey, soccer kit, footy shirt. And so with their background as well as the logo of the studio, I am left thinking, damn, dude, these guys are probably making a soccer game. All 2K has said is that they are looking to build 2K's next blockbuster sports franchise. And then 2K's statement to Daily Hive here says, the studio combines the passion of a startup with the scale of 2K to redefine the future of sports video games. We look forward to sharing more about what they're working on in the future. Nothing in here says, hey man, they're making a soccer game, but everything in here sure does imply to me that these guys are making a soccer game. When you combine that with the idea that Netflix made that FIFA game that launched rough, and I think the word there was like, oh, if they keep working on it, like, they'll eventually kind of establish a foundation, and there's something here that could be made good. And then I think a lot of that team got cut recently along, and then more recently, Netflix has cut a couple of more studios, including Night School. That just happened like last week. But you think 2K is going to get the FIFA license? I assume that this means that 2K is finally going to get the FIFA license, which everyone thought they were going to do when all of this stuff originally happened, when EA ditched FIFA or vice versa, and that they went their separate ways and all of that it was like the word then was like, oh, 2K is going to fast track a soccer game, and they're going to get the FIFA license, and they're going to make this stuff work. Like, this seems more like, oh, now this is going to happen, which, yeah, is fun. And not that, I mean, okay, not that anyone has ever liked FIFA, the organization, right? It's maybe not a great time because they were just in the news because of all the fucking bullshit around the World Cup, and whatever else. But it's not like there's never been a good time to like FIFA as a organization or whatever. So, especially with all the stuff they were just doing. Yeah, I think, was it UEFA was like, these guys are fucking dicks, and they're trying to fucking take private investment that's going to destroy soccer, and I don't know. FIFA is being FIFA. In short, my read on it as someone who doesn't give a fuck about soccer is that, boy, FIFA continues to suck shit at doing this. But at the same time, I have to imagine that that's exactly what 2K is going to do, right? Like, FIFA is still the name for video games, like, in a casual sense. Like, if you put out a video game and wrote the word FIFA on the box, I think you would have a lot of people that would go, oh, new FIFA. Even though EA has been making soccer games here for, without FIFA for a couple of years now, that does still carry some weight. I don't know, man. Like passionate soccer fans know better, right? Like, they probably would understand, like, oh yeah, like, this is obviously the FIFA games are now just called something else, and EA is still making them, and so this other game called FIFA is something else. But I don't know, like, it's been one of the interesting things going back and playing N64 games is this reminder of just like, there used to be competition in sports video games. There used to be multiple companies making multiple games across every single sport. And so even in hockey, you had your NHL breakaways along with EA's results. In basketball, you had NBA in the zone, and you had NBA live, and you know there was like a bunch of different stuff. Soccer, of course, Konami used to be a major player in soccer video games with International Superstar Soccer, ISS 98 or whatever the fuck. Along with EA making FIFA and whatever else, like there just used to be a lot more stuff happening in that space. And so I don't know, like the state of sports games, I think right now, you know, again, I can only get so worked up about it because it's just not really my thing. But I think that the sports video games in general to me just seem fucking sad, you know? Because there's no competition in any one of those sports anymore. EA picked up Madden a long time ago now, and you know, you've got PlayStation making the show for baseball. I don't know that there's an exclusive for NHL so much as there's no one out there that wants to fucking bother making a second hockey game. And then, you know, we had FIFA for a long time. Obviously, like, EA completely shit the bed with basketball, and so NBA 2K is the only game in town. And every year NBA 2K comes out, and every year I just hear people with the same exact fucking complaints about how fucked the monetization is, and how, like, oh, they didn't do anything meaningful to the fucking gameplay, and this, you know, like, there's just a lot of dissatisfaction there, of course. And golf. We used to get a lot of golf games, licensed or otherwise, and now you don't really get a lot of that. You know, even tennis games are hard to come by. And so, you know, even minors. There used to be a ton of motorsports also. That's been another thing looking at PlayStation games and N64 games, is this weird realization of just like, dude, there were so many fucking, like, just whether it was stock cars or rally cars or fucking formula cars, like there was just so much of that shit all the time. And now, you know, EA bought Codemasters, and so they ended up controlling a significant part of that market, and so they're the ones making the F1 games now. I don't know who the fuck is making NASCAR. Like, at some point, like, EA made NASCAR games for a long time, and then that license kept changing hands to the point where I don't know if anyone gives a fucking single fuck about the NASCAR licensed video games. Oh, iRacing is making NASCAR games now? That's, I mean, okay. Not everyone wants to do that. Not, you know, like, I don't know, like, good on iRacing, but like, wouldn't there be room in the market for a NASCAR game that is not for fucking actual sickos? Like, that sounds like an extreme version of my Madden problem of just like, what if there was a football game that was actually fun to play? That was for funsies, a fun competitive game. You know, wouldn't that be cool? I don't know. And so iRacing makes, okay, so they're trying to make a console game that appeals to normal people. Good fucking luck. The iRacing people have been so far down that rabbit hole for so long. You really expect them to be able to make a game that can appeal to a normal human being? No fucking chance. Oh, whatever. We'll see. I don't want to shit on them too much. It's an interest. iRacing is interesting, but good fucking luck. Are you kidding me? You seriously gonna fucking trust the iRacing people to make a game for normal human beings? Come on. You're fucking fooling yourself. Yeah, I don't know. Like, the sports scene is disappointing. It used to be like such a fun, again, even as someone who didn't really have a horse in that race or whatever, it was still exciting to watch and watch all that stuff unfold, because you had these, it wasn't just like, oh, the consoles are competing with each other. It was like you had these individual franchises where it was like, okay, we've got 2 soccer games, we've got 2, you know, 2 or 3 in some cases. You've got multiple games for each sport, and which one's the best one this year, and quarterback club's gonna get better this year, which and so that was always at least entertaining to see who was going to do the best work and who was going to fix their problems, and everyone was kind of driving each other forward, you know. And I think it was a very clear example of competition in the space being good for good for players, you know? Like everyone had a good reason, had a great incentive to make their game as good as they possibly could every single year. And now it's like, not to say that like the people working on Madden are like soulless shells of human beings or anything like that, but like, you know, the goals are different, right? Like they're not like, oh, we don't want to lose to another football game. It's like, oh, well, we need to optimize these loops to make sure that Ultimate Team packs fucking sell this and do that. And, you know, like it's just a different fucking business. But, you know, whatever. Like I've known people that have worked on Madden relatively recently, right? I mean, and they're actual human beings who care about actual football. They can only do so, you know, whatever. You can only do so fucking much on a team that size with incentives that are not built around making the greatest football game ever made, but are more around engagement and monetization and just like whatever other fucking bullshit metrics. Here's a metric for you. 21% of Nintendo Switch 2 owners have bought Pokemon Pokopia. That is, those numbers are coming from Nintendo, filtered through your good friends over at videogameschronicle.com. That means that 1 in 5 Switch 2 owners owns a copy of Pokemon Pokopia. That's a lot. That's, what is that? That's, how many millions of copies is that? That's, it's the second best selling Switch 2 game. It's hit 5 million in sales. And it continues to grow. They just put out their expansion, which seems interesting so far. I have not had a ton of time to dig into it, but man, people seem to really like Pokopia. It's a fucking great, and like it's easy to see why. When you sit down and play it, it is a very, very appealing fucking video game. It is so good. Not just for Pokemon fucking maniacs, you know. It's got a real appeal to it. It is fun to just kind of build out that area and do that stuff. So when they announced like, hey man, you can swim now and you can do this, and you know, like that's pretty fucking awesome. So, you know, what is that? That's 1 in 5. That's a little over 1 in 5, 21%. And yeah, that it is, I guess. It is just ahead of Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is at 4.78 million sales. So Donkey Kong enjoying a similar percentage of ownership across the Switch 2. I would probably take Pokopia over. Like Donkey Kong Bonanza is cool, is a cool ass game, but I think Pokopia is if I'm choosing. That's Pokopia is a great game. D23 happened, which is a Disney thing. I guess they put on this convention every year where it's like Comic-Con but for Disney shit, and they get everybody into a room somewhere near Disneyland and they say, here's the movies we're gonna make. They put out this fucking list, man. I can't fucking believe this. This list, so you know, whatever, they're making a new Avengers movie or whatever, a new Marvel movie. I saw this, IGN ran this list that was like from Marvel, I guess. And they're like, here are the 15 movies and TV shows you should watch in this order to get ready for fucking the next fucking Marvel movie. And I was just like looking at this going, are you fucking out of your fucking mind, dude? Are you seriously? You think I'm gonna fucking sit down and watch these fuck off? Like, it is the most, like, if you ever wanted like a clear picture of just like, oh, all this shit is bullshit, go fuck yourself. Like, to me, that is it. When they're like, here's a fucking list, and some of these are TV shows, so you can sit down and like, I just fucking fuck off, man. Who the fuck has time to fucking do that shit? But whatever, the actual, that, who cares? No, that doesn't matter. Matt Groening of The Simpsons was there because The Simpsons are also, Marge Simpson is a Disney princess, I guess, right? He was there along with some of the other kind of Simpsons leadership, I suppose. And they were kind of talking about some video game stuff during the Q&A. So they're making it, I guess I was like trying to figure out like, why did this happen? I was like, oh, right. Okay. Because they're making another Simpsons movie, which I guess that's kind of, that first Simpsons movie was all right. I don't know. Like the Simpsons is just it's simultaneously an institution and something that every time anyone talks about, I'm like, oh, right. They're still doing that. Jesus. Anyway, whatever. During the Q&A, they were asked about video games. Basically like, hey, now that a second Simpsons movie was on the way, are we going to get another Simpsons hit and run specifically? The quotes here specifically, again, from, this is from VGC's write-up of it. Matt Selman, who's the showrunner, who also co-wrote the original hit and run, said that would certainly be a treat. And then Matt Groening says, I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn. I think the original game is coming back in some form. To which Selman just kind of cut in and said, or not, to maybe remind him that had not been announced yet. Anyway, yeah, they're doing that. I mean, Matt Groening would know, right? This was so the Simpsons hit and run came up a little bit ago because Radical Entertainment, there was a new studio that was partially people from Radical, along with Hothead, and they have formed a new studio called New Radical Games. You get what you give. And they, because it's tied to Radical, if you click on the games button on their website over at newradical.ca, it just shows like Scarface and Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction and The Simpsons Hit and Run. So people were immediately like, oh my God, they're getting back together and they're going to make a new fucking Simpsons Hit and they're going to make a new Simpsons Hit and Run because why would they show that there, blah, blah, blah. And I think at the time I was like, nah, they're not just getting back together just to make fucking Simpsons Hit and Run again. And then, yeah. I guess we'll see on that one. But, yeah. Crazy. I guess, there was a good run of Simpsons games, or there was a run of Simpsons games there. Not necessarily a good run of Simpsons games, but we did have a handful. Because, God, there was there was Simpsons skateboarding, and there was Simpsons wrestling. They were kind of fumbling around for a while there with games that were sort of all over the place. And then they hit upon, it was Hit and Run and Road Rage are the two that I think stood out. Of that era, right? I mean, let's not talk about, we can talk about it, but I'm not talking about the 16-bit, 8-bit era of Simpsons games, right? And even that PS1, chunk of Simpsons games were pretty fucking rough. I remember Simpsons skateboarding being not good, but not the worst thing you could do. Not the worst idea in the world, but yeah, that Simpsons wrestling game was fucking terrible. And I don't know, I had really kind of checked out of the Simpsons by then, and so by the time stuff like Hit and Run was coming out, I wasn't really, I don't know, it just did not, I was not super interested in it. And you play it and you're like, oh yeah, you did a knockoff of this, but okay, yeah, sure. You did a thing here, and okay, Road Rage is just kind of this, and I see what you did here. And so it wasn't, I don't know, that stuff just didn't really hold a ton of appeal. But people remember both of those games super fondly. So I guess it makes sense if you can do the deal, if you can get the business together to either do a re-release and then a sequel, or just a re-release, or whatever. I think ideally you do both. Why not do another run of Simpsons games, right? Especially, like, how many more years do you think it has? There was some, I didn't end up reading the whole thing, but like there was, yeah, like how many more years do you really think The Simpsons has in it? I mean, people would have said 10, 15 years ago or whatever, but like, I don't know, like yeah, we'll get another 20 or 30 years. Sure. But it's just from a perspective of, yeah, like the actors that do those voices have been doing them for a very long time. And, you know, are you going to recast those roles? If they're willing to recast those roles, then I guess all bets are off, right? You could have another 1,000 years of The Simpsons at that point. But like, do you think that they would actually do that? Yeah, I feel like when I see more recent episodes of The Simpsons, like some of those voices are getting a little rough. You know, like I don't mean to. I'm not talking shit about it. It's natural. The passage of time is a motherfucker, man. But I do wonder. Yeah, I mean, what happens with The Simpsons after that? Would they genuinely be willing to recast those roles and go another 20 years or something? You know, like how do you end up going that? Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of, none of that sounds good to me. Anyway, the idea though of reissuing some of these fondly remembered Simpsons games, I think makes a lot of sense. You know, you could really go back. You know, where's Virtual Bart? You know, where can we get all of those terrible Imagineering Simpsons games on the NES? Can we get those re-released? Like, there's actually like kind of a, you know, like I think if you did a digital Eclipse collection of Simpsons games, I think that could be really interesting if they had the ability to tell those stories about how those games were made and how some of them were kind of tossed out, just like thrown out there. Like, oh yeah, I don't know, we made this, like we didn't have a lot of time, and yeah, here's another bad Simpsons game that Acclaim made. Boy, they sure did make a lot of them. That would be a really funny collection of games if it was accompanied by the appropriate documentary, right? So I don't know. I would certainly appreciate seeing something like that. Yes, Bart's Nightmare, and just, yeah, there's so many Game Boy game, you know, just like so, like all the handheld stuff. Like there's just such fucking, there's so fucking many, man. But hey, Hit and Run people liked, Road Rage people liked, so those seem like that those are at least like layups. Like those are modern enough games that if you were to reissue them, you could get away with upresing them, and you know, if you still have, I guess the question is if you still have all the original audio and you can make sure it's in the game at like a slightly higher fidelity than maybe it was then. I feel like a lot of PS2 games, we were maybe not quite full fidelity, so some of that might stand out. That was something, God, what was it? Was it Destroy All Humans? I'm trying to think. There was a remake of a PS2 era game where like the audio just sounded fucking bad because game audio didn't sound good then. A lot of it was very blurry. You know, it's like when we were playing Wheel of Fortune for the Nintendo 64 last week, and all of that audio is just the most muffled. I mean, it's the worst platform for it, but just a lot of that stuff. Yeah, Stubbs the Zombie. That was another one. When they remade Stubbs, there was a certain quality to the audio that you're like, oh yeah, this is what games used to sound like, huh? We didn't really fix some of this stuff, if I remember right. Stubbs, I did play some of that Stubbs remake. Not all of it though. I remember enjoying Stubbs the Zombie, and then when that remake came out, going like, oh yeah, this isn't I don't need to. It turns out I didn't need to see this again. Turns out I can just remember Stubbs the Zombie by listening to the soundtrack and going, yeah, this was good. From the makers of Halo, sort of. Stubbs the Zombie. Everyone loves Stubbs. And that's it for the news. Again, next week we'll have whatever. I'll figure out the timing, but I'm planning to be here to talk over the Gamescom opening night live thing. I just need to do the math on the timing and stuff, but it is next Tuesday. It's next week sometime. If it's not Tuesday, it's Wednesday. I gotta, again, time zones and whatever else. I gotta figure all that out. But that's the news. Why don't we get into some podcast emails? podcast@guard.bike is the email address. Send me some emails and I will look at them and we'll talk it out. We'll figure it out here. P from upstate New York writes in and says, with regards to last week's discussion on what upcoming games are big and important enough or whatever to justify debuting on Netflix, couldn't you see CD Projekt Red debuting their next bit of Witcher 4 footage there as some kind of big GTA style reveal? Or if not Witcher, then Cyberpunk 2 whenever that happens. It seems like they already have a relationship of sorts with Netflix based on the TV shows for both of those properties. I guess the Witcher show has done fine enough for multiple seasons, and that Cyberpunk cartoon was a big hit. They self-publish, so it's not like they're beholden to someone else's subscription service, so I could see it happening. Sure, I don't think that would be nearly as big of a deal. It's not to say that those games are not big deals in the world of gaming and that they don't have crossover appeal or whatever, but I think that like those reveals would happen there because of the TV shows, right? Because there's already some technical audience there for those properties on Netflix because those TV shows exist. And I think that's what makes them make sense. GTA doesn't need that affiliation. GTA is obviously fucking significantly bigger than the fucking Witcher and Cyberpunk, you know? And those are, again, not small video games. But I don't think I still think they are not on the same fucking plane of existence as GTA these days. So yes and no. I think you're right, but not for the same reasons is what I would say there. Dave from Jersey says, while this would never happen, a part of me would be really excited to see a new company get into the console business. Well, I don't miss the old console war nonsense with all the fanboys and all that other shit. I'm paraphrasing here. I do miss when it felt like major players were truly competing with one another. That healthy competition made the industry more exciting to me. Even with Xbox trying to do a weird about face right now with exclusives, it still feels like we're headed towards this really boring, single, very expensive machine future. No matter how irrational, I just wish someone would jump in. Sure. I tend to agree that like it was exciting to see new players coming into the space for some chunk of time there. Whether that was like, NEC with the TurboGrafx 16 when that was coming out, even Atari with the Jaguar. Obviously Atari was not a new name in the space, but they had not been relevant in quite some time. When the Jaguar finally came out, it was exciting to have these other and it's exciting now, to look back on these systems and be like, oh man, it's just cool. Like, look at these weird fucking systems and everything. Like, there's just so much fucking weird shit happening all the time. The CDI even has its place in that conversation, more so now than it did then. But yeah, I tend to agree. When Sony got into making video games, it was, the thing I've always said is when you first heard the news that Sony was getting into video games, you were like, oh, great. Like, they didn't learn anything from the 3DO or the CDI, like these, from Philips or from Panasonic, all these other big CE manufacturers getting into video games and just shitting the bed because they have no idea what they're doing. Like, it was very easy to believe that Sony was going to make the exact same mistake. You know? You're just like, these fucking, like, go back to making fucking CD players. You people have no idea what the fuck you're doing. Like, none of it just made any sense. And so the early days of hearing Sony and video games in the same sentence, well, I mean, you thought about Hook for the Sega CD because Sony ImageSoft was putting out games. Cliffhanger. But when you heard that Sony was going to have a go at it in the hardware, on the hardware side of things, it was initially not something that made you didn't hear it and go, oh, cool, man, there's going to be new stuff, because the track record of companies like that getting into video games included the 3DO and the CDI and all of that, and Pioneer to a certain extent. I mean, the Laser Active was this super expensive thing, and there were only like 4 Laser Active games, and so you just had a lot of these examples of why this didn't work and why would it work this time. It wasn't until I think, it wasn't until like I heard from someone in like, this would have been maybe early 94, mid 94 maybe. They're like, hey, no, like Sony is taking this very seriously. Like someone said to me specifically, like they are fucking going really hard at this. And also you started hearing like, oh, like people from Sega left to go over to Sony's US operation, and there's this and that. And like you started to hear more stories about like, no, they know exactly what the fuck they're doing. Like they're not, they know that these other companies fucked up, and they're making a very serious run at this. Like this isn't some fucking half-cocked fucking endeavor. Like they are fucking major. And so even before I had seen any kind of output of a PlayStation, you started seeing screenshots here and there, the fucking dinosaur or whatever else. Like there was this feeling of like, oh, whatever they're doing, like it's not going to be like, it's not going to be like the 3DO. And so that was very exciting, I think, even before. And then, there was a similar, like, I don't think that, it's interesting because you would think that the launch of the PlayStation, the success of the PlayStation would have kind of dialed some of that sentiment down. But when Microsoft said, hey, we want to make a video game console, it was actually not, again, it was not something that was super well received, because, even though they had games on PC and whatever else, there was this feeling for a while of just like, what the fuck do these fucking people know? It's like, God. Like, what are they going to make? They're just going to make a fucked up computer. Like, this isn't going to fucking work at all. Like, there's no way. And so I don't think the early sentiment around the Xbox was very positive either. And it wasn't until I think this may have been the last time I went to CES. No, it was not. It was it was maybe like the second to last time that I went to CES. But they were showing, they had Xbox hardware at least at CES, where they were doing the initial announce and all that sort of stuff. And so we went out there to literally like touch an Xbox. And like when you started talking to them more and more, it became apparent that they were like, okay, no, like they're doing it their way. They're doing a bunch of weird stuff that isn't necessarily just like ports of the games that exist on other platforms. Like the early talk about Xbox was this stuff, your Halos and whatever. And, they eventually got that exclusive for Dead or Alive. And so there was this kind of feeling of just like, okay, they're making, it was kind of like the Jaguar, in a weird way. Because the thing about the Jaguar, it was like, here's a bunch of games, and we have to launch a bunch of new shit, because we don't have a bunch of shit that we can lean on the way PlayStation does, the way, and all of the massive third-party support that PlayStation already enjoyed. And Sega obviously had a built-in legacy for decades at that point. And so when you first started hearing about Xbox and the types of games that were coming to Xbox, it was reminiscent of the early days of Jaguar, because it was just like, here's a bunch of new shit, and you don't know what any of it is. You're looking at like the initial batch of Xbox games, and they're like, yeah, I don't know, we're making a fucking Bruce Lee game. We got this other thing, Kokto Chojin. And we got this other thing, you know, like, yeah, we got a wrestling game, but it's not the same wrestling game that's on all the other platforms. We got the, you know, like the early years of Xbox, you know, you're just like, fuck it, we got a boat game. And we got our own football game, and we got our, you know, because they didn't know, you know, they saw what happened to the Dreamcast, and they said, we have to make sports games because we don't know if EA's on board. And so we need to make sure, we need to go make NFL Fever, you know? And so they approached it that way. And so there was something very exciting about the early days of Xbox because it was a ton of shit you had never heard of before. And that was exciting, you know, because we were, you know, entering the PlayStation 2 era, and, you know, we were already seeing plenty of sequels to games, and, you know, like it was exciting to have like a bunch of new shit because it sounded weird. And you're just like, oh, they're going to make their own fucking weird fighting games. And, you know, in the same way that, like, before you actually play it, when you hear about Fight for Life, or when you hear about some of the games that came to the Jaguar, you're like, oh, this is totally different than what is happening elsewhere. Like the overlap on the Jaguar library for games that also appeared on other platforms is like relatively low. And so that's the cool thing, you know, the early days of Xbox, everything felt like an exclusive before they had to sit there and go, we've got exclusive games, you know, just by virtue of just like they had to establish a bunch of brand new shit. Even if some of that shit was Bloodwake or Brute Force or, you know, whatever, right? In those initial days, you know, you still had your Crimson Skies, you still had Halo, obviously, you know, and that is what made that whole thing exciting out of the gate, really. And, you know, the Xbox got fine third-party support. Yes, Quantum Red, exactly, yes. Internet Explorer 11 says Quantum Redshift. The first time anyone has typed Quantum Redshift in at least 36 hours. And that was very exciting. And so, yeah, that you know, you talk about wanting a new player in the space. I agree, it would be fun, but like the stakes are so fucking high now. I mean, they were always high, but the technology involved and all of this stuff, you know, would you get developer buy-in to make games for a new platform? Would you get retailers to care? Would you get like the uphill battle of making a new fucking device? I just like, that's really tough. And I think, you know, you would maybe get your first party, you know, you would if you got that third party support, they would just be porting their games over there, right? So like, all right, you get all the same games everyone else does. Congratulations. And that's not all that exciting. You would have to establish your own pipeline, your own set of studios. Like it would be a gargantuan effort with today's costs and today's standards and everything else. If you truly wanted to make a competitive device with what is likely to be the PlayStation 6 and the next Xbox, there are it's a very limited number of companies that could genuinely enter this space, and they would have had to have entered it years ago. You would already know it was coming if someone else was about to do something like that, I think. Oaken1 says the Apple TV is kind of capable. Yeah, and they're right around the corner, supposedly, from announcing a new Apple TV, and, you know, there's always the opportunity for them to engage in gaming more directly, but it's not like Apple's going to be like, here's the fucking Pippin 2. You know, they're not going to come out of the gate with like, here's something that is directly and completely competitive in a hardware performance perspective than with a PlayStation, with an Xbox, whatever. Like, there's just there ain't enough money in it to for it to be worth the fucking hassle. So yeah, you know, Apple's interest in video games is very strange, and, you know, like the stuff I talked about, yeah, I don't know, like Apple, I don't know what the fuck's going on over there. That Castlevania game's getting delisted. They did an Apple Arcade Castlevania game that is like, it is going to get removed from Apple Arcade, and then also it is going to be completely shut down to the point where you can't even play it, like whatever services side they're going to Grimoire of Souls, I think it's called, which was not a great Castlevania game, but hey, whatever. Yeah, but I just don't know where it would come from. You know, like what companies are out there realistically, you know, unless you got some kind of new conglomerate out of like China or something like that, you know, would they, but I just, they seem smarter than that. They're like, no, whatever. There are plenty of platforms out there for video games. We don't need to make our own. We're not going to fall into that fucking nightmare trap. So yeah, but there is something exciting about new people getting it. I mean, it was the cool thing about the TurboGrafx even. The TurboGrafx, I think, is a really great example of what I'm talking about because it has that, like, again, the amount of overlap between libraries back then, at least with the TurboGrafx compared to like the SNES or the Genesis, like it was they were very different. You do have a handful of examples of like these games came out on multiple platforms, and there's like a weird amount of Amiga games, you know, your TV sports whatevers, that ended up coming out on the PC Engine. You know, it came from the desert and whatever else. But like the exciting thing about the TurboGrafx library is just it's a bunch of stuff that you haven't seen. You know, Battle Royale, the 5-player wrestling game where one guy's main attack is that he gets down on all fours and bites your ankles. It's kinky stuff, man. It's hot shit. You know, don't get me started about Bonk's Adventure, but you know, don't talk to me about JJ and Jeff. Don't even come over here and talk to me about Bravo Man. I had a friend in high school who was always making fun of Bravo Man, to the point where we would just walk around and say, Bravo, Bravo, which is not a great impression of Bravo Man's audio, but what are you going to do? Jake from Florida writes in and says, I visited a local arcade for the first time, was delighted to discover they had a Sinistar cabinet. Being young enough to have never encountered one in the wild, however, despite the cabinet looking to be in good condition, upon reaching the point where Sinistar should be screaming at me, not only did his voice clips not play, but the rest of the sound cut out for what I estimate was the duration of the voice clip. I know Sinistar was a particularly early example of voice in an arcade game. Is there some special hardware inside that can break separately from the rest of the game? Perhaps that hardware is hard or impossible to fix or replace at this point. Maybe the operator turned the voices off, if it's even possible. Yeah, I don't believe that you can just turn the voice off. So I have a guess about this. It is always possible that like a chip fails or something, right? And just like some, you know, hey, this specific, and there are cases where some audio hardware or, you know, like things can break in an arcade game that still leave the game largely playable. And so, you know, like I just put the Smash TV board, I just put in the Smash TV, like the audio board is actually a totally separate sub board that connects to it. And if you wire it up backwards, if the cable connecting those two is not on the right pin, it will just make the startup bong over and over again without playing any game audio, which is helpful to let you know, hey, I need to turn that cable around. Anyway, my actual guess here is that was not a genuine Sinistar board in the cabinet, and that it was some kind of emulator fucking setup that was running an old enough version of MAME to need samples for that audio instead of emulated audio, and they did not have the samples properly installed. Because that's how that acts. That's exactly what happens to Sinistar if you don't have the samples. Is the audio cuts out because the game audio cuts to allow for the speech, and then it doesn't actually play. The Mister did that for a while because it didn't, you know, they had not properly recreated that part of it, but I believe the Mister core for Sinistar acts the way it is supposed to now. But that would be my actual first guess, is that rather than a hardware failure, that maybe you were looking at something fucking weird that is not an actual arcade board. Daniel in Atlanta writes in, with sorry, let me start over. With Xbox being in bad shape, there's been discussion of the next Xbox not happening. No, there hasn't. I mean, not any serious. Anyway, that's not true. The response to that is often that Microsoft has already put in big orders for parts and there'd be some financial penalty to canceling those orders. But what happens when a new console is a bust? If a new system languishes on shelves, the factory wouldn't keep pumping them out. Is there language in hardware contracts that if sales fall below a certain threshold, there's no penalty on order cancellation? No, it's more likely that they would just like build the number of like if they were really like, oh, this is going miserably to the point where we're not going to make them at all anymore, which is not the failure would have to be so catastrophic that's practically, I mean, it's unheard of, but I guess we live in unprecedented times. No, well, look, you would have to make a certain number. Like you're contracted to make a certain quantity, and then, you know, you probably have a contract with all of those manufacturers to make X number of consoles for X number of months delivery. You know, like every month we're going to make this many and ship them to you or whatever, right? And there are terms on that contract. There are out clauses on that contract, I'm sure, to where like, hey, we can give you 90 days notice and you'll make 3 more months of consoles, and then we end it, right? In a situation where the entire company is going out of business, then yeah, you know, like bankruptcy is gonna, you know, would cause a more catastrophic ceasing of production or whatever. But that's, you know, then whatever penalties would come with that just get layered on top of the bankruptcy shit. If things are that dire for somebody, it's just, you know, it's all bad, right? But yeah, I just, at this point, you know, I don't think there's any reason to believe that Microsoft would not make another piece of hardware. Whether that hardware resonates or not, I think is a different conversation. And if they will ever form a strategy that makes any kind of like sense, you know, I think that that remains to be seen. But I don't think there's any, you know, like, again, this stuff is not that far off. The thing to remember is that like we're reaching a point here where, like, unless something crazy happens here and everyone, you know, like if prices skyrocket to an even further degree, it's like, okay, now this thing that already didn't make a ton of sense is now crossed a certain threshold to where it makes no sense for 95% of our potential audience, or it's too expensive or whatever. Like we're making the rich kid console, and they're already doing that, right? But if it gets even worse, you know, there's always the potential that something like that happens. But, you know, I would imagine that most of this stuff is already locked in. Or close to being locked in. As we just said in the news, you know, Sony's not committing to a release date for the PlayStation 6. But, like, if they wanted to launch one next year, I would assume that most of the deals to build them would have to be in place, right? Because if they're not in line already for those components are going to go to someone else. And, you know, at some point, you've got to take what you can get and go, fuck it, we'll ship it for this. And then we'll see if we can, what we can sell it for on the other end, right? We'll figure it out. Cost of goods is this, profit is this, you know, whatever. Because they also, the other thing is that you have to remember is that, like, they have a ton of studios that they own, and they also have a ton of third parties out there that have to be told, hey, here's how you make games for our console, and here's when that console's coming out, so your games need to be ready here. We're going to start certifying games here for launch, and that, like, there needs to be at some point a timeline. Like, if you're 2K and you're like, okay, like, what, you know, are we making basketball for your next platform or not? Or is WWE coming out on PlayStation 6? You know, like, these are things that, like, they need to know fucking now, right? And you know, they need to know specs. They need to know, like, what can we get away with? Like, you know, otherwise they're just, you know, otherwise we end up with a cluster of launch games that look like PS5 games, which maybe the difference won't matter as much anyway. I don't know. But I think that, again, there's such a weird... There's so many different people in line for the launch of a console, whether that's third parties or whatever. Like, there's just a ton of different, stakeholders or whatever that need to be informed. Hey, this console's coming out here. Or like, hey, this console's super not coming out. And oh, shit. Like if there was something catastrophic, everyone kind of needs to know that stuff. And we're at a point now, I don't know, like I guess like I just, my feeling on it is like we're gonna reach a point of no return here with all of that, to where if they get out there and start telling third-party developers, hey, here's when stuff's coming out, their ability to delay significantly once they've got third parties making games, I think it becomes a much more damaging situation, because now you've got all of these other companies relying on, like, spending money making games for your platform that they expect to recoup starting right here on this day or this quarter or whatever. If you then push another 6 months, they're like, oh, well, shit. Now, like, we can't benefit from the initial marketing that we were going to do for the existing other versions of the game, so we need to do a whole nother wave of marketing spend to promote the PlayStation 6 version of this game, or we need to do this. Like, there's so many different fucking bad scenarios that erupt if they announce a date or confirm a date to third parties and then don't hit it, that it damages their credibility. And this is something that I think, like, like we've heard it in fits and starts over the past couple of years, that like the third party situation for Xbox, like they have not every third party has been thrilled with supporting the Xbox, right? So imagine a scenario where the next Xbox comes along and then they delay it, or they, like, something like that happens. Like, you've got a lot of companies out there that are already, like Warner Brothers or whoever is maybe already fed up with how their Xbox games are performing. If they then get fucked over by another weird Xbox decision, at some point they just go like, dude, you guys are you get your fucking shit together. Like, we're done. We don't need to make games on your platform. You're costing us money. Like, we wasted a ton of fucking money doing this. Like, fuck off. Like, you end up in that sort of situation, and that's a fucking bad place to be. So, I don't know. I think that, people that say, like, oh, they're not going to make another Xbox. Like, I think that train is just rolling too fucking hard already. It's not that they couldn't unwind it. Like, if they woke up tomorrow and said, oh shit, we're out. Or if some situation changed where, obviously if there's just company problems and the whole thing's fucked or whatever, that's a different scenario. If you have to cancel it because of others, the last thing you care about at that point is your third party relationships, because something even crazier has already happened. But again, if you're already far enough down this road to where you need to start disclosing to third parties, and like, which I don't actually know the answer to that question, if companies have gotten full disclosure on new hardware yet. I know, like, Xbox has said, like, some kind of basic spec stuff, and I think that they've, they said as much, I think, back at GDC, in terms of just like, hey, here's when alpha kits are going to be available or whatever. So they at least tried to provide some kind of timetable. And you can kind of assume that Sony's going to be in a similar pocket, right? Because competitively, they sort of have to be. But yeah, I don't... I guess the other thing is kind of like, what are these consoles going to be that's going to actually be different? Xbox is going to be dramatically different, right? If they're actually making a fucking PC and then doing whatever console mode or, whatever insane shit that they're going to do on top of that to make it an Xbox, that seems like something that developers will have to contend with. It may just be that, like, hey, their PC version is now their Xbox version. And maybe it's not that much additional work, and maybe it's actually less work in the long run because they're just repurposing PC for Xbox. But like, it's hard to envision a scenario where the PlayStation 6 architecturally is like dramatically different than the PS5. It just seems like that they would like look at power, parts availability, whatever, and just go like, yeah, okay. keep the train rolling. It's been going good so far, and this one's more powerful. And so, like to me, like that seems like pretty obvious. But and then the handheld potentially ends up being the thing that makes PlayStation a little bit more complex, right? But even in that situation, I do think that the scenario they end up moving towards is developers will make games for PS5, PS5 Pro, and the two PS6 era devices, console and handheld. Assuming that is still the plan, which, those plans could change. I could see something like that, but anyway. Jeff from Queens writes in and says, with the release of Agent 64, spies never die, and the nostalgia people hold for the scientifically greatest N64 game ever made, GoldenEye 64, I was sad to... It's GoldenEye 007, by the way. It's not GoldenEye 64. Come on, man. I was sad to see that few people remember or have even heard of the leaked remake of GoldenEye for the Xbox 360, which is highly illegal, and you can only get it in the same circles that you trade Japanese wrestling tapes and venomous snakes on the New York City subway. Have you gotten to play this? What did you think of it? More importantly, what is the most illegal video game that you have ever played? So yes, I did look at the GoldenEye 360 remake thing, and it was interesting. I don't know. It was interesting to see them kind of adapting GoldenEye a little bit to different controller things and whatever. I didn't play a ton of it because, whatever. But I did end up taking a look at it. The most illegal video game I've ever played. I mean, I reviewed the Guy game. I mean, that is a game that is literally illegal, I guess. Someone in chat says Thrill Kill. Yeah, I guess, I don't know. Like yes. I have access to Thrill Kill, as does everyone at this point. I did not save a disc or whatever, but we did have discs of Thrill Kill. I think they were the same builds, if not exactly the same, then very similar to the builds that were floating around when the game got canceled. Thrill Kill was not the thing that, like you can go see this for yourself. I mean, yes, obviously the Guy game is more illegal than fucking Thrill Kill. Because the Guy game, if you don't know the story, the Guy game is a game partially made by Jeff Spangenberg, who was the founder of Retro Studios, who, to hear other people at Retro tell it was, like the Retro had like 4 projects going with Nintendo, and none of them were coming together, and he was the leader of the company, and people did not have great things to say about his leadership, and he was ousted as part of the... I think as part of Nintendo fully acquiring Retro Studios, I think Spangenberg was out at that point, if not before that. And then he went and made a new studio, went and put together a new studio, and then they made the Guy game, which the Guy game is a trivia game with FMV in it that came out for Xbox and PlayStation 2. And it is like a Girls Gone Wild style trivia game where they got this dipshit to go around with a video camera at like spring break. Like they went and filmed a bunch of shit at spring break, and like if you get all the questions right, the girls take off their tops. And at the time it was fucking crazy because you did not see FMV boobs in games. It just didn't happen. Turns out one of those girls was underage. One of those, I believe they checked IDs, but perhaps she had a fake ID, or I don't know the exact situation there, but there is someone in that game that is not 18, and so as a result, this game that already no one was giving a fuck about and really caring about was then pulled from shelves, and that was that. I don't think that studio continued to what they called top heavy games on top of everything else. Were they called top heavy? And so I reviewed the Guy game, and so I've played a significant chunk of that thing, and it's not good. It's a bad trivia game. It's a bad trivia game. Like period. Like that's sort of the boob situation. It was kind of whatever. I mean, you know, back before you knew, like, hey, by the way, this is also illegal. It was like that stuff was pretty underwhelming. There was some, like, they had a real chip on their shoulder when it came time to market that game. When they tried to take it around and show it to people, there was a real, like, look at this fun game. Look, we're having this fun game. Like, it's fun. What the fuck is wrong? You know, like, it was a real weird. It was presented very weirdly. Similarly to BMX XXX when Acclaim was pushing that, like, there was just a real. BMX XXX actually, like, in terms of like a preview coverage or like a preview visit for a game that made me feel mildly uncomfortable. BMX XXX was like, they really leaned on, like, they came to our office with BMX XXX and really tried to convey to us, like, we've got Hollywood level writing talent writing this game. The writing is incredible. It's hilarious. The writing is so funny. We've partnered with Scores, the strip club, and all, like, it was just like this real. And it was these, you know, Acclaim is based back east, right? And so it was just a bunch of fucking Jersey guys. Well, not a bunch of Jersey guys. I don't know. The guy that I think they brought out that it was attached to the game, because it was like PR people. It was like a PR guy that I'd known, you know, had seen a lot of. And I think the producer on the game was like, I want to say he was the brother of the head of Acclaim. I want to see, it was like the CEO's brother, if I remember right. And there was just a real weird, I don't know, it was just a real fucking strange vibe, the way they were presenting it. And I've told the story, like, they called my boss and complained because I didn't want to go to the launch party for BMX XXX, which they held at a Scores strip club in New York. And they had already sent us the game. We had already reviewed it. I already didn't like it. And so from my perspective, it was like, dude, I don't fucking want to go to New York to hang out in I don't want to fucking hang out in a strip club, period. I especially don't want to go hang out in a strip club with a bunch of people who worked on a game that I'd fucking just reviewed and said sucks. So, like, this sounds like a terrible fucking time. But because they were so, like, I guess I think they were getting turned down. I've told this story before. But I think so many people turned them down to go on that trip that, like, the PR people were really under pressure. They're like, how come no one's coming to our party? What the fuck? Do your fucking job. How come no one's coming? Like, get them to go. And so there was a real desperation to that thing specifically that was just like, fuck this. Like, no fucking way. So they literally, like, tried to put pressure on, like, my boss and all this other stuff to try to get us to send someone out. And no, I think we just said, like, no, what the fuck? Like, we didn't go to events that didn't have any editorial value back then. And it was a case where, like, they were literally like, we had the game in hand, knew it was bad, and they're, like, trying to get us to come to some fucking party where there's nothing, like, it's not like they're gonna announce DLC, or, you know, like, there was no announcement attached to it. Just like, come to a party, fly across the country to come to a party. Like, no, like, never. Like, why? What the fuck's the point? Like, that's exactly why we, you know, like, there's policies in place about this shit. But yeah, in terms of illegal video games, I don't know. The Guy game is technically the correct answer there, in terms of the most illegal game I've ever played. But I don't know, like, I have a PC version of that Ultima 4 remake that only came out on phones. Maybe that's not illegal, but I have it somewhere. That's weird. I've definitely had people show me shit they were not supposed to fucking show me. Yeah, is Cookies Bustle? Cookies Bustle is the most legal game ever made. The illegal thing about it is that there's some scumbag out there still. Anyway, yeah, I saw that GoldenEye thing. It was interesting. Oh, X-Men Destiny. I don't know that I've ever actually played X-Men Destiny, but I suppose the lawsuit that forced them to that asked them to take copies of that off shelves, I suppose is actually technically makes that game illegal. Jeremy from Clarkston, Michigan. MI is Michigan, right? Or is it anyway? For the past few generations, there have been a fair share of remakes of classic games that feel worthwhile and well done. But the one genre I can think of that hasn't had that luxury is fighting games. Do you think there's a reason why fighting games don't get the remake treatment like others do? I know the FGC can be a tricky subculture to please, but I could also see bringing back much-loved games like Third Strike, Mark of the Wolves, or the like would bring newer players in and give them context to why those games are still loved the way they are. I mean, they make sequels, right? I mean, you know, like fighting games don't get remakes, they get sequels, and they get reissues, you know? And so, you know, there have been plenty of versions of Mark of the Wolves over the years. There have been versions of Third Strike, and there was what is it? Street Fighter HD Remix is like maybe as close as you get to a remake of a fighting game because they did sort of rebalance it, and that's a weird thing that people liked at the time. It's a weird fucking game, but you know, there was definitely a crowd of people that were into it. But you just kind of end up getting, you primarily get updates, reissues. Yes, Ultra Street Fighter 2, sure. Fucking Ultra Street Fighter 2. Yeah. I'm gonna play that in first person with my Joy-Cons. Throw some fucking fireballs. Or you get sequels, you know, like they just made a sequel to Mark of the Wolves. As much as that's a forgettable thing and maybe something that's worth forgetting, they did in fact make a sequel to Mark of the Wolves. And so, you know, that's the stuff that you're more likely to get at this point is you know, hey, you're going to get a collection of these older games. Capcom just put out their Capcom Fighting Collection stuff a couple of years ago. And so, you know, they did stuff like that where they put out like Power Stone and some of that other stuff again. Or you get full on new video games. I don't think that there's, you know, because I think there are ways to play those games. And people that want to play them in tournament settings or whatever can. I think the people that want to take those games seriously are still able to. You do have some cases where it's like, oh, now they've made it easier for us to play this game by reissuing it or whatever. Like, Hamster just put out Angel Eyes. But I think it's the PlayStation version of it. It's not the arcade version. But you do have these cases where like SNK has been doing it a lot where they're just reissuing some of these games. And in some cases they're putting better netcode in them. Or they're adding netcode to them, I guess. You know, these arcade games did not originally have netcode at all. And sometimes that netcode is good, and oftentimes that netcode is dog shit. Because apparently that's hard. The weird thing has been, like, SNK has put out a couple of games and then, like, added characters. Like, they've put out old Neo Geo games and put updates in them, which is just strange. I don't know how that's being received, if that's actually interesting to people beyond like just reading it and going, oh, weird. Man, that's fucked up. It's weird that they put Art of Fighting 3 out again and put a new character in it or whatever. Like, you know, there's been a couple of cases like that, where it's like years later they're doing something strange. But yeah, I think, you know, competitively or whatever, the thing that I always remember hearing people say about fighting games, and I think that's still true, is that people just move forward. With rare exception, you know, there are going to be true classics that, you know, will kind of remain, that will have a scene forever, right? But like as soon as a new game, like, oh, Capcom put out, you know, like no one's I'm not going to say no one, but pretty much no one is playing like Street Fighter 4 right now. Seriously. I'm sure there's a pocket of maniacs that are still playing it, like if we're being real about it. But like you have these dots on the landscape of these games that are forever, right? And you have the games that got replaced by them. You know, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is in a lot of ways the pinnacle of all of those versus games. And so there's probably not a lot of people out there that are playing X-Men versus Street Fighter, right? Or even Children of the Atom. Yeah, like, you know, there's just like these things progress up to a point, and then MVC2 is such a fucking massive thing that it will always have some kind of disgusting crowd. And yeah, I think when you remake it, like, what do you know, remakes change a lot of things. Like, if you look at the patch notes for Halo, you know, because they just remade Halo. They just put out patch notes that are just like, yeah, the gun shoots more like we want it to. Like, you know, like just things that are like full on balance changes to whatever they made and whatever, right? Because now the gun fires differently. And maybe it fires more like the original or less like, you know, I don't know what the specific change they made, but like there's a gun change in the patch they just put out. With a fighting game, like if you remade it, what would you keep? Because you would, you know, like when Ryu throws a fireball, it's this many frames of startup and then it comes out and then this many frames of recovery. Like, you know, like the things about fighting games, the way they move every single frame is so fucking specific to the competitive experience that like remaking them doesn't do shit. Like, you know, you're gonna just like make the graphics better, but the mechanics will be the same, because that even looks crazy. Like if you made a full fucking if you said we're gonna remake Street Fighter fucking 2, we're gonna make hyper fighting all over again, baby. And what, you make it polygonal? Like you actually remade it? Like I mean full on remake. Like are you at some point you're rebalancing that game in ways that make it not a remake anymore, or just like what, you know, like, or you're staying completely devoted to every single piece of frame data as the original game, and then you're like having polygonal graphics in it that have to contort to those specific frames, and the animation would look fucked. Or you would add a bunch of additional animation to it, and that would look even more fucked for people who are into the initial timing or whatever. And so we have these moments through time where, you know, again, in addition to kind of the pinnacles of games that will truly like last forever, which is a pretty small number, you do have these moments where you've got stuff like HD Remix, where they try to do something and then actually they redrew it in ways that are, they made some choices, right? And that's what you have to do. You have to make some choices. But again, at some point, the amount of work you have to do to actually make a game look modern, like you might as well just rebalance it. You might as well just make a new thing. And then at some point you're like, well, let's make new characters. Let's do this, and let's just make the next Street Fighter, instead of, you know, trying to reissue Street Fighter 2 with modern graphics, or like what we think of as a remake. Like when we talk about remakes for other games, right? Like that's fucking ridiculous. Ezekiel says actually a War Gods remake might be sick. Like, no, okay, no, it wouldn't. Like we can't just, you're just saying stuff into the internet now. Like there's no universe in which a remake of War Gods would be sick. That's not to say that I would not be excited about it, but it's really, and at some point you would just be making a sequel to War Gods. You might as well just call that War Gods 2. You don't want a up-resed remake of Biofreaks. You want Biofreaks 2. In this one, Cyclown is a pretty lady. So I think that's you know, that's a messy discussion, but obviously there's a lot of stuff. You do have some cases where like an arcade game will get like ported to a different framework or whatever. Like they did, what is it? It's like the King of Fighters 98 like ultimate match thing, like the UMM thing. Like there's some weird shit like that, but I just don't think that a remake in the way that we think about like, oh, we remade God of War, or we remade, you know, or I guess that's a reboot really, but when we think about like devoted remakes of games where it's like, hey, we're telling the same story, we're, you know, updating some of the look and feel of the game to make it more modern, but ultimately this is meant to be the same experience, the same game, meaning not a remaster, not a case where you're just like taking the exact same game and just bumping it up in fidelity, right? The amount of work that would go into a remake of a Street Fighter game, you might as well just slap a new number on it, right? You might as well do the rest of the work and make a brand new game. So that there's really, especially in a scenario like Street Fighter where they're still making new games, like making a remake would muddle all of that on top of everything else. It's the weird thing Call of Duty got that is, it's not quite a remake, but like Call of Duty this year is fucked 9 different ways, right? But imagine a world where you put out Black Ops 7 and a great deal of the maps in that game are from old Black Ops games. And then on top of that, someone said, also, we're just going to fucking start selling new versions of those old Black Ops games again. And so you can play the same maps in both games in the same year. Because Call of Duty's been remaking maps for years and years and years now. Like they've been, like in some cases they are very devoted remakes of those maps, and in some cases they're like inspired by pre-existing maps. They're like, oh, we did a new map in this setting, and there's some things you might recognize as being sort of like this, but it is by and large a new map. They did both. But what the other and so the other thing they did in Black Ops this year, if you really want to like add another layer of crazy to this, because you have the situation where they put out Black Ops 1 and 2 on PlayStation, and there are maps from those games in Black Ops 7. The other thing they did is now there's a playlist in Black Ops 7 called Black Ops Classic that turns off all of the fast movement and disables some of the crazier kill streaks and whatever. It's not a like for like remake of original Black Ops, but then you only play on those Black Ops maps. So it's like you can get old Black Ops in a direct, concentrated, real way, or you can play their weird, watered down Black Ops 7 version of it. It's just fucking insane. Like they tried to attack it from every angle and like never talked to each other about what they were. I don't know what the fuck happened. I don't know how the fuck that happens. It's fucking crazy. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous. They're also putting out a map. I just read this. This was not in the news because who cares? But since we're talking about it, one of the maps they're about to put out in a couple of weeks here is a map set in a pinball machine, which sounds fucking awesome already. As a fan of Level Lord's Unreal maps, where you are a tiny man in a gigantic living room, the idea of being trapped in a pinball machine sounds fucking good to me, dude. But the pinball machine is apparently based on the legacy and history of Nuketown. So they've taken elements from the Nuketown map, like a bus or whatever, and they've fucking made they are making a pinball machine fucking multiplayer map in that game that is Nuketown themed, but not Nuketown. Just fucking bizarre, man. I mean, whatever. That actually sounds super interesting. But like, it's I don't know, man. It really feels like they lost the plot, but also like they probably know that no one's paying attention, whether it's because of this year's game not doing all that great, but also like the beta for the new Call of Duty is this weekend. So like they're already kind of on the downward portion of the year of Call of Duty. But yeah, I don't know. I think that was the thing that got me most excited. There's a map they just put into Call of Duty recently that's like it's like a big obstacle course, and there's a big launcher that launches you into like you can launch yourself forward like a Quake 3 fucking map, and there's just a bunch of silly shit on it. It looks very like the fake Japanese stuff inside of Saints Row. Like it kind of looks a little bit like that. And that's like fun. I don't know. Like it reminded me like these games used to be ridiculous, and they should be. And the idea that they're making a map set inside a pinball machine feels like this really great. And it's a shame that it's happening in a down year for Call of Duty, because I actually really like the idea of that as like a kind of final like fuck you to these people that want Call of Duty to be some fucking milsim fucking horse shit. They're just like, you need to take it. I want some boots on the ground, serious fucking skins. And they're like, check this out, man. You're inside a pinball machine. Isn't that sick? The answer is yes, that's fucking sick. Man, the fuck do you want? Most boring shit in the fucking world? You should check out Unreal fucking Tournament, man. Some people made some fucking wonderful maps. If you want realistic maps in a shooter, I want you to download the fucking like Compton map or whatever for Quake 3. The map that came out alongside the Dr. Dre and Eminem skins they put out. Because that's just the streets, dog. It's real out there. Anyway. Yeah, I don't know. They're doing that Call of Duty beta in a couple of days here. I'm curious about it. I don't know. Like there's such a desperation. There's such a weird desperation around all of it. In terms of them, like whether it's like the loyalty bonus. Hey man, if you bought last year's game, we're gonna give you a deal on this year's game because we know. We can't come out and say, yeah, we know, but like we're gonna wink and nod and be like, yeah, you're gonna get a deal on this one because fuck, man. Turns out people didn't like it when the giant machete fell out of the sky in the campaign of Black Ops 7. To which I say, yeah, it's not great, but at least they fucking did something. I don't know. Chad writes in and asks, you play as Goofy and Donald? Having never played a single Kingdom Hearts before and seeing people go crazy online about playing as Goofy and Donald in Kingdom Hearts 4, I refuse to go anywhere else but the #1 podcast for Kingdom Hearts information. Is it true that you haven't played as these characters in 20 years? So I guess like they're part of the party, right? I mean, it's a situation where like you're the fucking key guy. And then like these other characters kind of come in and out of your party, right? I think that's how it works. And so like you're controlling them to a certain extent, but it's not necessarily like direct control, I think is how that works. In the long story, they're making it. I guess they're making a Kingdom Hearts 4, huh? Fuck, dude. Why? I mean, I know why. Because there's just like a bunch of sad people out there that'll buy it, but like, yuck. Let's see here. Let's leave this one anonymous just to double check, but it comes to us from Philadelphia. The Philadelphia. Cutting right to the chase. I have wanted to write about games professionally as long as I can remember, and I have recently had the chance to do so. I'm even getting paid very little for my submissions. My quandary: the site is founded and written mostly by one passionate guy. However, I suspect that many of the articles on the site, mostly written by him, are AI generated. The articles I have written for him are very much not. I am staunchly against AI being used in creative capacities. I worry that mine and other contributors are being used as cover to mask AI generated articles. There's virtually no chance the site becomes more than a passion project, so what's the harm, I guess? On the other hand, being associated with slop feels quite bad. The site has given me the opportunity to write my first real published game review, and I want to do more. The pressure of the deadline and the satisfaction of meeting it and writing articles I can be proud of has fulfilled me in ways I never expected. What would you do here? I think if the site doesn't have, I mean, you know, when you think about these relationships that you have with publications as a freelancer, right? You have to think about, what are you getting out of this relationship versus what are they getting out of that, your work, right? And decide, you know, if that matters to you, right? Like it says that you say that you're getting paid, which is nice. Plenty of people aren't. So at least there's that. Is it affording you opportunities to get better at this? Is it affording you opportunities to contact publishers and build relationships and forge your way ahead in this, you know? I think that's the thing you would have to look at, right? Is, you know, again, what are you getting out of this? Is it giving you an opportunity to improve and again, like build up, whether it's contacts or just get used to working with people or whatever, because those are things that will benefit you even if you were to start writing on your own. You don't list the name of the site here, and it's fine. I would think about how much traffic are those articles doing? Could you parlay your work into, you know, working more places? You know, is this something that will afford you, you know, you're building up something of a portfolio that you can show to someone else and be like, hey, you should let me write for your site too. You know, and so that's valuable. I don't know that I've ever, you know, when I've been sent writing samples, and granted, it's been a pretty long time since I've had to hire any freelance. And it, obviously something of a different era, but I have never really cared that much about where the person was writing the articles. I got writing samples that were from people's own personal blogs that, you know, were nowhere, or just things they had written specifically to send in as writing samples, like that hadn't necessarily even been published anywhere. Or like, hey, I've got a few things published here, and then I also wrote these things that are, you know, sample news article, sample preview, sample whatever, just to get a feel for, you know, this type of work or whatever. But I don't know that I've felt like, oh, I'm going to automatically turn this person down because these articles are on this domain or whatever. And I dealt with plenty of people who had written for sites like the ones you're describing, of like, there's a person out there who wants to get into E3, and so they start a website just so they can get into E3, and then they let all their friends write for them so that they can all get into E3, for example. So yeah, I don't know. I think you have to look at it that way. You know, like if the money is nice to have, then I don't necessarily think it's something you need to like run away from or whatever. It's not a great situation, right? And yeah, you don't want to be affiliated with that stuff. But I think the good news is that, like, when it comes time for you to use your work to get more work, I don't know that anyone's gonna be like clicking around the other articles on that site, and if they see a bunch of bullshit, you know, I don't know, they're probably not gonna. I don't know that necessarily reflects on you. So I would play it that way. I would evaluate that relationship and see, you know, hey, are you getting anything out of this? And how quickly can you try to parlay that into something else, right? You know, because the one thing I would say is, like, you know, when people have writing samples across multiple publications, I think that's interesting because it says that, you know, hey, multiple editors have said, yeah, to you and your work. And that eventually carries value because that eventually kind of conveys something of a reputation. So yeah, I think, you know, that's not necessarily like the it's hard to give a definitive answer on this, right? Because yeah, you're right. It's not great. You know, it's not great to have a bunch of AI shit around your work. And that's bad news for sure. But we live in a world where I think a lot of this is something that I think maybe also I would have been a little harder on 25 years ago or whatever, right? I know people that like write about video games and also like do freelance public relations for video games. There are plenty of people who have worked in consulting capacities who are still doing editorial style coverage for games. Stuff that, 20 years ago I would have said, fuck that. Like, absolutely fucking not. Like, I wouldn't want to work with people that are like playing both sides like that. It's just, it's a gigantic conflict of interest right out of the fucking gate. Nowadays, I think I'm a little more realistic about it, where, you kind of look at it and go like, yeah, people have to fucking eat, man. People need, there are no jobs out here. So if someone's doing something like that, I go like, hey, that's not ideal. But we don't live in ideal times. And so I think you have to kind of consider things that way. Of course, when it comes to, telling, when it comes to, what do you say to your audience about the articles you're writing and all of that other stuff, I do think that like disclosure always goes a long way in situations like that. But that's a separate conversation. In your case, I would say evaluate the relationship and figure out if you value it or not, or if you and hey, there you can always, you didn't sign up to write for someone exclusively, I assume. So I would try to get out there. It's hard out there. It's bad out there. It's been bad out there for a long time. And also every day there are more people with like decades of experience getting laid off that are out there looking for freelance work, if only to tide them over to the next thing. So, freelancing has always been a highly competitive type of thing. And right now the competition is extremely fucking stiff. So, try to find some work that you feel like no one else is doing. I feel like that's always the advice, right? Is, when new people come in, like look and see where are the holes, what can you offer that no one else is? What can, how can you kind of carve out your own place in this? That is a lot harder to replace or a lot harder to find with someone else or whatever. I think that's sort of, that has value. Elliot from Pittsburgh writes in, it says, Soul Calibur, I miss it. I was wondering if you think we'll ever see another one. It's a legendary franchise that maybe lost its way over the years with some less than essential games. That's a very nice way of putting it. I have tons of fond memories of the series, everything from feeding quarters into the Soul Edge machine at my local batting cages to fiending round after round of Soul Calibur 2 for the GameCube, to whooping my unsuspecting Smash-obsessed buddy's ass in Soul Calibur 4. I know the industry isn't in great shape right now, and Namco is preoccupied with Tekken 8. No disrespect to Tekken, but personally I've always preferred Soul Calibur, and I feel like I can't be the only one out there. Might be wishful thinking, but maybe enough time has passed for a reboot? So I think the situation, okay. So a lot of things have happened, right? Harada has left Namco. Other people, like one of the director, or one of Harada's, someone on Harada's team, on the Tekken team, also just left to join Harada at his new spot. And so obviously, like, Tekken is in a bit of a fucking spot, right? People have not been happy with Tekken 8 for a good long time, and it doesn't seem like that situation is improving. And so fighting games at Namco are in kind of a weird spot, right? Where, who's going to lead that team going forward, and what are they going to do? Are we going to roll right into Tekken 9? I think in some weird way, and you might not get the game that you want out of this because a lot of people have left and everything else. It's a really good, you could make a really strong case for, like, even if it's just a stopgap to get to a Tekken reboot or some kind of rethink of Tekken, there's kind of never been a better time for them to do something with Soul Calibur. People are fucking pissed about the state of Tekken 8. Heads rolled, people left, like just like shit fucking happened, right? If you just go right into Tekken 9, not enough time will have passed. People will still be salty about Tekken 8. It will have to deal with that. It'll have to dig itself out and prove itself, like in ways that are almost unfair. But if you instead took a break and said, actually, here's Soul Calibur. Or yes, Soul Edge too. They should go back to Soul. They should go back to Soul Blade, man. Fuck Soul Edge. So I think that would be a great path for Namco to kind of give a Tekken team time to really rethink it. And they would probably be the same team at this point, right? Because you're not going to put two fighting games out of the same team at the same time or whatever. But I think if you were building a new team or you had to restock a team that had lost a lot of senior people, like maybe revisiting Soul Calibur would be a slightly lower stakes way to do that. And you would also give some time for people to, to want Tekken again. It's kind of the weird thing, like we've had it good, right? Tekken 7 was a heck of a game, and Tekken 8 launched well. I get why people are mad. Like the more I dug into where Tekken 8 is at, I was like, okay, yeah, no, I see now. But as someone who was not playing the game at that level, like, I still enjoy Tekken 8. It's not a bad game. But I think that, yeah, that would be what I would do. If I were in charge of all of this shit at Namco, I'd be like, okay, we can't dig Tekken out of this hole right now. We need to just like have this thing run its course. We'll do our season of DLC. We'll put together like one more surprise or one more thing to throw in near the end just to try to end Tekken 8 on a positive note. And then we will do a Soul Calibur. And see how that goes. And then you get to a Tekken 9. Because that's the tag games followed, because it's 1, 2, 3, then tag. Then was it 4, 5, 6 and tag 2? Or was it 4, 5, tag 2, then 6? I'm trying to think, did they establish a cadence of 3 games, then a tag? Because if so, I would try to keep that. If not, I would do Tekken Tag 3. Just to change things up a little bit, just to, give you, again, just a little something else going on. But yeah, I think that it's a great time to bring back Soul Calibur. Or Soul Edge, or whatever you want to call it. Let's see. Got time for maybe one or two more. Eric from Seattle writes in and says, Cliffy B hates wall bouncing. Finally. This is okay. There's a he links to a Facebook post from Cliff where he's kind of talking about wall bouncing and some of the other stuff here. I'm just looking at kind of some of what Cliff said. There's a chunk of Gears versus multiplayer players that only play this way. Wall bouncing a shotgun, that's it. That's the way they play. They use side cover entry and the cancellation of it as a way of drifting through the map as a hacked together pseudo dodge surf mode, and they dominate. Is it fun to watch? Sure. Fun to perform? Yes, as it actually does require some skill. Enjoyable to watch? Absolutely. Does it make sense and work in the wild world of multiplayer? No. And then he's got paragraphs of him kind of breaking that stuff down. To kind of get into those feelings, but the short version of it is that Cliff thinks that the wall bouncing stuff is not great. I agree. Anyway, back to Eric's question. Cliffy seems to really not like wall bouncing, and honestly, his post got me wondering What if the answer isn't to remove it entirely, but to give players a mode where that shit is just turned off? It sounds crazy for Gears because, for better or worse, wall bouncing has basically become synonymous with the competitive side of the series, but it also made me think about Fortnite and its no-build mode. Epic essentially took one of the defining mechanics of Fortnite and said, what if we just didn't? And no build didn't just become some niche alternative, it became arguably the most popular way to play the game. That makes me wonder if there's a similar opportunity with Gears. What would happen if they had a mode built around the man? This ghost is hitting me hard. I'm like stuttering. What the fuck's going on over here? Blah! If they had a mode built around the new movement system without wall bouncing, you'd still have the shooting, cover, positioning, and other fundamentals of Gears, but you'd remove the mechanic that can make the higher level game look completely foreign to someone who isn't already invested in it. I could see something like that potentially bringing in a whole new audience, or at least giving lapsed players a reason to come back. And if Fortnite has taught us anything, sometimes removing a defining mechanic doesn't kill the game. It can actually make the game accessible to a completely different group of players. I have no idea if that's something the Coalition is even considering, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. So yeah, I tend to think that the wall bouncing stuff is bad for the game, but it's been in it so long now that you are probably alienating. Okay, this question is specific for Gears, right? I think if we were talking about a new franchise that still had the potential to bring in new eyeballs and all this other stuff, maybe my answer would be a little bit different, right? But we're talking about Gears of fucking War. I think the ship has sailed on this. I think that if you made a mode that was just competitive multiplayer with no wall bouncing, I don't think enough players care about any of this to play it. I would be potentially interested, but at the end of the day, I don't know that I'm that interested in competitive Gears of any ilk. So that would be something where I go like, yeah, you know, that if that was an option, it would be the option I would pick, because it would be closer to the single player and co-op side of Gears, because that's the stuff I actually care about in Gears of War. And so there would be something more like that. I'd be like, okay, yeah, that would be the version I would play, because the wall bounce shotgun stuff, I don't think that's any fun at all. And I don't, you know, again, I'm not coming at this from a place of just like, oh, it's because I do so bad. And like, yeah, you know, that's, I just don't think it's fun. It's one of those scenarios where like the thing you need to do to get good at this mode is something I don't want to do. It's not worth it for me. Again, and so I think that also carries over in a way where if you made a mode that just didn't have the wall bouncing and all that, I'd be like, oh, finally. But I can't sit here and tell you I would play 200 hours of Gears of War competitive multiplayer if they didn't have that, or even 50 or whatever, right? Would I play it longer? Probably. But probably not to such a degree that it would impact anything. And so I don't think there's a large enough audience for Gears. Like you would alienate so much of the existing Gears multiplayer audience if you were to take that out completely, that it would devastate the game. You know? Because I think by and large, the people that are coming to that mode know what they're in for, and they want it because that's what they like to do. I think actually, you know, in some, like, it is sort of a sick scenario, because there is a haves and have-nots sort of situation that happens in Gears multiplayer where you've got the people that just go like, I'm going to try this out, who don't know any of that shit or don't do it. And they just oftentimes just get worked over by the players that do. And that's the thrill for them, right? It's the equivalent of the streamer that complains about skill-based matchmaking because it means they can't make sick clips. Because they keep getting into matches with other players who are good. I think that there is a certain amount of Gears multiplayer that is at least at launch, at least in this beta for sure, and then in the early weeks of Gears before everyone just gives up on it, there is that feeling of just like, oh yeah, I can get on these servers and just like dash around and fuck up all these people, and I'm having a great time, and like everyone else is having a shitty time, but who cares? You know, you kind of. Yeah. So yeah, I do think that there is something probably worth the frustrating thing about E-Day is, man, we had a good planet going and then those fuckers popped out of the ground and just started killing us all. It was a really frustrating. Anyway, the frustrating thing about that game, Gears of War E-Day, is that they did add this new movement stuff. Like the run feels different. You can slide, you can jump. You can fucking jump, dude. Are you crazy? And like playing it, you're like, oh, this is actually kind of neat. But then, you know, you've got these fuckers rolling around with shotguns just blasting in. You're like, okay, yeah. Still Gears. It's still Gears. I'm good. I played some of the because the beta ran last weekend as well. I think it's done now for good. I played through the Horde mode. I played a couple of matches there. Or what are they calling it? It's Horde something. Like it has a slightly different name. But it is their co-op mode. And the idea is that you have multiple squads doing co-op shit in the same space. And so each of them has their goals that they need to complete. Horde Siege, thank you. Thank you, 40 Gumble. If they launch you into a mission, the first time you connect to it, they launch you into onboarding, which is kind of a shorter version of the mission, where you're kind of defending an objective for like 3 waves and then you extract. And the onboarding, I think, is terrible. When you think about what the word onboarding means in terms of getting you familiar with the mode, I think it does an absolute shit job of that, because I came out of it going like, why are there other squads here? Like they're off guarding other objectives and I'm seeing other human players that are not part of my squad running around, but they're not interacting with us. They're not, like, their objective is somewhere else on the map. And so like we're barely seeing them. Why is this like this? Also, why I'm not building anything. Like I have energy points and I'm able to spend that on more ammo and a couple of other kind of pieces of equipment. But like when you think about Horde mode, you think about like I'm building fences and I'm doing this, and like the onboarding didn't get into any of that at all. And so I found it to be actually much more confusing about what that mode actually is, instead of onboarding me and getting me familiar with what this thing actually is. I think they did a phenomenally poor job there of kind of trying to convey what the fuck that mode actually is, because there was just a box inside of a restaurant and we needed to guard it for 3 waves, and enemy spawns, because it's a much larger map, the enemies are spawning like way further away than they would in a traditional Horde match. And so it felt fucking bad. And then when you finish that, it you know, kind of opens up more of the traditional options, and from there you're picking like 3 different match lengths. And so the short one is like Blitz, and then there are longer versions for, you know, because like Horde could go a long time, and so it seems like that they let you kind of pick, you know, based on probably how much free time you have or whatever. Maybe you want to get a quick one in. It was very hard to get a quick one in Horde mode in some of the various modes they did in the past. So I do kind of welcome that to an extent. But in terms of like what you're actually doing in the mode and how it relates to the previous types of Horde modes, it really felt underwhelming to me. The first, and I played a couple of them, and I was like, I don't really get why this feels very off. This doesn't feel like a proper Horde mode. I don't know. And you know, maybe in the shipping game they'll do a better job of telling you what the fuck you're supposed to do in the onboarding thing to kind of get you a better acclimated to it. But also maybe there'll just be a little bit more going on. Like it just felt, I don't know, like it just felt kind of pointless to me. So I don't know if anyone else played it. Like not a lot of people in the circles I run in talking about Gears of War apparently. So I don't know a single person who played it. But I did try it out. It's just, yeah, it struck me as very strange. a strange choice for the mode that people liked in Gears of War, I guess. Like, for them to have changed it up in such a way that I played it and went like, this is a co-op mode and I'm defending a thing, but this feels like not recognizable as the thing that I want to do in this, the thing that I have loved about previous Gears games. Like, they were the ones that set the tone. They're the ones who named the fucking mode, man. They're the reason that all those games had fucking horde modes in them. So that struck me as very fucking weird. So I was left somewhat confused about the future of any kind of Gears multiplayer, let alone just the competitive. So there you go. Let's see here. You can fit one more in here. Ian in Bellingham, Washington writes in and says, I've been listening to some podcasts from some different people from around 10 years ago when VR had just started being released to consumers, and most of the people I listened to thought that VR was going to be the future of not only gaming, but media in general. I have my own opinions on why that future never came to be, but I would like to hear your opinion on what happened to VR, and I guess another further question of your opinion of the Steam frame and its upcoming release. So I've talked quite a bit about the failure of VR, right? And how crazy it is that it didn't like settle into some kind of bigger groove than it did, right? The Steam frame itself, I think, is potentially really interesting. I would very much like to try one, and I think that, you know, as part of Valve's like kind of burgeoning hardware ecosystem or whatever, I think the Steam frame is a really interesting piece of that puzzle, and I want to see how they end up handling it, you know, with the chipset inside of the headset combined with like, okay, what things can we run directly on the headset, what things need to be run externally and streamed to the headset, because either are viable. I think that stuff is really interesting. I think that, you know, Facebook buying Oculus and doing a bunch of fucking stupid shit with it really didn't help. They, from a marketing perspective, you know, I think that VR got marketed all wrong, and when they tried to make it this mainstream thing, it just seemed like cultish and stupid. Mark Zuckerberg is like one of the most uncharismatic people in the fucking history of the planet, and so when you see him, you know, like, you know, it's like, oh yeah, all these meetings are bad, and so we're gonna have you have cool avatars, and you can do these meetings, and everyone at Facebook needs to be meeting inside of the headset. You know, like the metaverse shit killed it. If they had just said, hey, you know, or it helped, right? It helped kill it. If everyone had just been cool and been fucking normal about it and been like, yeah, these are neat, you can do some cool shit in them. You can play some games. You can watch some 3D content, and that's really neat. Porn is really weird in VR. You can check out a bunch of porno videos. Look at all these weird porno videos. If they had just been normal about VR and its capabilities and just been like, yeah, man, this porno is weird looking. It's really fascinating, but like, I don't know. This seems strange. And, you know, talked about those capabilities and just been like, hey, you can fucking watch 2D shit on a giant screen inside of your head if you want to do that. There are some really neat cockpit style games you can play. There are some, you know, like, I think if they had been, you know, it would have kind of just settled into something of a small niche, and it would be fine. But instead, you had Facebook come in and overinvest in it like it was going to be the future of everything. And this is how everyone's going to interact in the future, and the metaverse is the way it's going to go. And so they pumped a bunch of money into it, and when it didn't meet that standard, it all fell apart for them. And now they're fucking running away screaming from virtual reality after buying up most of it. And so that stuff doesn't help. I don't think there's a scenario where VR becomes like the dominant form of media, like whatever, right? And I've said that before. Like, it's too isolating. It's a terrible group experience. If you have a family at home, you can't just put on your headset and disappear because you've got shit happening in your life. Like, you just don't have fucking time for that. And so the player base, the active users for that ends up being limited because people just don't fucking have time to vanish for 2 hours to play some fucking VR extraction shooter or whatever. Or, I mean, people do, but not everyone, right? And so in a world where you've got to sell that headset to fucking every living soul because Facebook needs it to be the biggest thing ever, like, yeah, it's never going to fucking meet that standard ever. It also, was a victim of a bubble of sorts, right? I mean, you had a lot of investors thinking, buying into the hype, going like, oh, VR is going to be the future. And so a lot of studios got a lot of really easy funding at that time because they were just making a VR thing. There was a lot of shady money out there to be taken if you were interested in shady money. If you just wanted a bunch of weird Chinese money to make a VR thing and then run away with it, you could. Some people did. Good on them, I guess. I don't know. But like eventually that money dried up, and then when they were left to fend for themselves and actually run the business as a real business, you suddenly find like, oh, there's not enough VR like users out there to support this company anymore, and we got to shut it down. And there's like shit happens. So the smaller companies couldn't survive that, and Facebook couldn't survive that. And so VR technology, like, it has technically advanced, right? I mean, we've gotten to headsets that, remember, like when the fucking Oculus Rift came out, you had to plug in a bunch of sensors that were essentially fucking cameras around your room. When Valve came out with their solutions, you had to hang fucking lighthouses on your wall to fucking like define the space. It's a fucking nightmare, dude. And so advancing to, the inside out tracking to where you don't have to do that shit anymore, that is a huge help to make that thing more normal to something that someone could just buy and use. But it's expensive. It would be even more expensive now than it was then. But the Quest hardware was always, affordable-ish, more than you would want to spend on a whim. And in a world where VR software was just not super engaging, in a world where just the fucking the rhythm game, the fucking dancing game, the name fucking escapes me, Beat Saber, in a world where Beat Saber was the like killer app for VR for ever, and there wasn't really anything else coming along to dethrone that or move it in a different direction. Like at some point that shit just dries up, and it dried up. The Steam frame, I think, is really fucking weird. Conceptually, the idea that they're doing it at all. But Steam also has a lot of fucking VR games on it. And so in a sense, like, it makes sense for Valve to at least support the people who are there already. I have a hard time believing that the release of the Steam frame will kick off any kind of interesting new boom in VR development. And so I don't know. I don't know who buys one of those and why do they buy it. Why do they buy one of those over a Quest if you're just going to stream if you can just stream Steam things to it? I like the things they're doing to get more games to run on the headset itself. I think that's really interesting. But that could just as easily be applied to a handheld or something too, if they wanted to go that route with the chipsets and what have you. And so like, I wonder, like, will people want a Steam frame? Like at some point, I think Valve is obligated to offer VR hardware. I mean, they'll still sell you an index, won't they? I think that's an expensive way to go, and you get right back into the weird situation of having to hang things on your wall and all of that stuff. So I think the idea of Valve having a more modern VR device, I think, is like good. But it doesn't seem like something that's going to lead to some kind of new burst of interest in VR. I think that the die's been cast, like people know what they're getting, and if you're buying one of those, it's so you can play super hot VR because you don't, or because because you don't like Facebook, right? You don't want to buy a Quest because you don't like Facebook. And there's not a lot of other options out there that are like renowned and tested. And like there's a bunch of fucking crazy headsets from maniacs out there that you can still buy. I don't know how well any of that stuff works in the Steam environment or whatever, but you know, like Pimax, or like there were always these other companies that were out there making headsets. So like the Steam frame at least answers that question, and here's, you know, but in some ways you look at it and go like, here it is, the last VR headset, and maybe it'll be the last one you ever need. But I don't really I don't really know who is the massive audience for that thing, you know? It's you know, it's cool that they're doing it. I would very much like to own one and play around with it. I think that it'll be good for playing the small handful of VR games that I have always liked, which is like fucking Space Pirate Trainer. Still, I would like to play Eve Valkyrie, but they shut those servers down, I believe, so you can't. But like that was always, and that was a launch fucking Rift game. And I think it is still one of the coolest things I've ever fucking done in VR, because they really thought about the best way to do a cool cockpit shooter in VR. So, you know, it'll be nice to play Jeff Minter's stuff, and, you know, nice to have a kind of a final headset. I wonder if there will be another Quest, because that was always the, you know, they had a product roadmap, but they also had a lot of internal hand wringing at Facebook about like, hey, yeah, like these headsets are selling okay, but what we're finding is that people buy one and fucking never use it a second time, or like they get it and use it for a while and then they put it away and that's that. And so the engagement, or just like the number of people buying games a year later, like it just was a thing that people would get and fuck around with and be like, okay, yeah, I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I have this in case something else comes along. And nothing else came along. You know, even Half-Life Alyx was, you know, a big deal. But in some ways, Half-Life Alyx is the last big deal. Right? Has there been a giant VR game since then? VR only, I guess I should say. Like, is anyone even still making, like, I just, yeah, it's for sim racer people, and that's about it. Cockpit stuff, that was always the coolest thing. Oh yeah, I guess that Deadpool game came out on the Quest, right? Like that was like their last. That was like their last game. Their, like, Facebook's last big budget thing was probably that Deadpool game. But in terms of things that came out after Alyx that were as big as Alyx, like, I don't know if there was much. Anyway, that's going to do it for the show. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk some more. We'll hang out. We'll play some video games. I think, actually, no, I need to read some emails to see. I don't think I can play any of the games I am currently playing. So there's that. But yeah, come on through. We'll hang out. We'll do some stuff. And I will see you then.